Tonight we return to southern Mesopotamia during the winter of 1946 when archaeologists cut into a silent mound at Eridu. The Iraqi Directorate of Antiquities had sent Fuad Safar and Seton Lloyd to examine this weathered rise above the plain. Earlier explorers connected the site with ancient Eridu through their inscribed bricks, scattered ruins, and records preserved in distant museums, yet nobody fully understood what rested beneath the broken summit. The first trenches revealed something far stranger than one ruined sanctuary. Beneath later walls appeared older walls, and beneath those foundations waited still earlier foundations. Each building seemed to stand upon the memory of another. The mound was not simply covering a temple. It was preserving a long sequence of sacred rebuilding, compressed into clay like pages in a sealed book. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You may also share your location and local time in the comments. It is pleasant to imagine distant listeners gathering quietly around the same ancient landscape tonight. You stand now beside the excavation, where the southern air carries dust across an almost empty horizon. The ground feels hard beneath your feet, though patches of powdery soil shift around your sandals. Salt glimmers faintly upon the plain. Far away, reeds tremble near shallow water, their dry leaves rubbing together with a papery murmur. Above you, the sky appears enormous. Nothing softens its pale and pitiless brightness. The mound rises ahead like a low island stranded after a vanished flood. Broken bricks cover its surface, their edges rounded by centuries of wind and occasional rain. There is no grand entrance, no shining gateway waits for you. Only trenches, baskets, brushes, measuring cords, and patient workers slowly removing compacted earth. Archaeology, despite modern imagination, often begins with sore backs and extremely uncooperative dirt. The workers follow changes in colour and texture that most visitors would never notice. A reddish band may indicate a burned surface. A thin grey line may preserve ash from a distant ritual meal. Hard clay might mark a floor, while softer soil could reveal a doorway filled deliberately long ago. Each difference matters. Every patch of earth may be part of a vanished room. Records confirm that Eridu was occupied during the long prehistoric age called the Ubaid period. Farming villages already existed across parts of Mesopotamia, yet large urban civilizations had not fully emerged. Writing remained far in the future. Kings had not yet filled monuments with their names and victories. Still, people came here. They carried baskets of mud, chopped reeds, fish, grain, pottery, and memories. They shaped wet bricks beneath the sun, then placed them carefully along measured lines. Their settlement grew near waters that once spread more widely across this region. Research connected with the University of Chicago has helped reconstruct the ancient environment surrounding southern Mesopotamian settlements. The modern desert can therefore mislead you. Eridu did not begin as a lonely monument rising from endless dryness. It belonged to a shifting world of marshes, channels, mudflats, and seasonal pools. Water moved unpredictably through this landscape. A useful channel might become choked with silt within one generation. A shoreline could retreat, leaving boats stranded beside cracked earth. Fresh water offered life, yet it could also vanish without apology. Perhaps this uncertainty explains why the sacred buildings mattered so deeply. A temple could provide permanence where the landscape offered very little. Its walls could establish a fixed centre within moving water and unreliable soil. The excavators soon recognized that the mound contained a staircase through time. At the top stood remains connected with later Mesopotamian rulers and monumental construction. Deeper trenches entered periods without royal inscriptions. Further down, even familiar architectural forms began to dissolve. The deeper the workers descended, the smaller the surviving buildings became. Large platforms gave way to simpler rooms, thick walls narrowed. Elaborate plans retreated into modest arrangements of mud brick, plaster, niches, and carefully positioned openings, yet something remained consistent. Sacred construction repeatedly returned to nearly the same location. This persistence forms the first clue within Eridu's lost blueprint. No papyrus drawing survives, and no clay tablet explains the earliest measurements. The builders left no written manual describing where each wall should stand. Their knowledge survives through repetition instead. One generation covered an aging sanctuary and raised another upon its remains. Later builders respected lines established by people whose names were already forgotten. Floors climbed higher as centuries passed, while the sacred center remained anchored below. Your mind drifts toward the people who performed this work. Perhaps they knew stories about every buried wall. Perhaps elders pointed toward particular corners and described ceremonies no outsider could witness. Perhaps rebuilding itself became an act of remembering. It's also possible that practical concerns shaped this strange sequence. New buildings may have protected their interiors from rising damp or seasonal flooding. Walls weakened quickly when exposed to moisture, heat, and salt. Mud brick is wonderfully obedient during construction and wonderfully fragile afterward. Still, practical repairs do not explain everything. The builders repeatedly preserved the same ceremonial focus. Even when rebuilding allowed easier alternatives, they did not simply abandon the old place and begin elsewhere. They returned to it. That choice gives the mound its quiet power. Seton Lloyd later described a long sequence of temple structures uncovered during the campaigns. Fuad Safar recorded walls, platforms, pottery, and deposits with the careful attention demanded by prehistoric archaeology. Their work revealed that Eridu's sacred history extended far beyond its famous later monuments. The discovery also produced an argument that remains open among scholars. Were the earliest small buildings truly temples, or were they special communal houses that gradually acquired religious meaning? Some researchers emphasize altars, niches, and repeated rebuilding. Others caution that domestic and sacred activities were not always sharply separated. You can feel the uncertainty within the exposed rooms. A raised platform may have supported an offering, a statue, or an ordinary household object. A concentration of ash could mark ritual burning, cooking, or repeated cleaning. Architecture speaks quietly, and it rarely answers impatient questions. One curious discovery from Eridu illustrates the mound's unpredictable nature. An earlier British museum expedition recovered a lump of deep blue manufactured glass from a much later layer. Scholars debated its age and significance because ancient glass production remains difficult to trace securely. The object does not explain the first temple. It simply reminds you that Eridu gathered many different centuries within one place. A single trench could pass from monumental religion into village life, then encounter an object that seems almost impossibly refined. Nothing here rests alone. Every fragment belongs to a larger vertical story. As the sun begins lowering, shadows gather inside the excavation cuts. The exposed walls appear clearer under softer light. Their mud bricks form narrow lines across the floor, turning suddenly at corners and disappearing beneath unexcavated earth. You imagine the first builders standing nearby. Their hands are coated with clay. Reed baskets leave rough marks against their shoulders. Someone checks the direction of a wall, while another smooths plaster across its damp surface. No written language records their instructions. No surviving ruler claims responsibility. Yet the structure follows an intention that remains visible thousands of years later. Later tradition would remember Eridu as the first city and associate its sanctuary with Enki, the keeper of wisdom and deep fresh water. Those beliefs belong to written ages still hidden beyond the present trench. Here, at the beginning, you possess only walls, but walls can remember. They preserve decisions about direction, access, height, privacy, and gathering. They show where people were allowed to stand and where movement became restricted. They reveal how an ordinary room slowly separated itself from ordinary life. The mound beneath your feet therefore holds more than accumulated ruins. It contains a design repeated until repetition became tradition. That design may have guided later temples across Mesopotamia, though its earliest meaning remains uncertain. Night settles gently over Eridu. The last warmth leaves the exposed bricks, and the wind cools against your skin. Somewhere below, another floor waits beneath another layer of packed earth. Its builders remain nameless, their measurements remain unexplained, yet their blueprint has not vanished. It sleeps within the mound. For a moment, the trench seems almost too small to contain anything important. The walls enclose a modest rectangular space, hardly larger than a village room. No towering columns rise from the floor. No monumental stairway announces the presence of a powerful god, yet the proportions feel deliberate. The longest walls guide your eyes toward one end, where a raised platform interrupts the plain surface. Opposite it, a smaller installation appears near the wall. Openings control how a visitor might enter, turn, and approach the central space. This is architecture beginning to speak. The earliest surviving sanctuary at Eridu was built from mud brick, shaped by hand and dried beneath the sun. Its walls were simple, but their arrangement was not careless. Archaeologists identified a central room with features interpreted as an offering table and an altar. Such elements would later become familiar within Mesopotamian temples. Here, they appear in a remarkably early setting, before writing preserves the names of priests or ceremonial rules. You lower yourself beside the exposed foundation. The bricks feel rough and faintly gritty beneath your fingers. Tiny pieces of straw remain trapped within the clay, placed there to strengthen the mixture. A builder pressed each block into shape, probably using a wooden mould or a practiced pair of hands. The bricks were ordinary materials, their purpose was not. Researchers at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago have long emphasized that early Mesopotamian communities transformed everyday building techniques into increasingly formal public architecture. Eridu offers one of the clearest examples of this transformation. A house shelters a family. A sanctuary gathers a community around something unseen. The difference may begin with only a few choices. A platform rises where no sleeping mat belongs. A doorway shifts away from the center, forcing visitors to turn. A wall thickens, separating the interior from casual movement outside. Small decisions accumulate, meaning settles in space. You can imagine approaching the building during its active life. The outer settlement remains low and scattered, with ovens smoking near courtyards and goats nosing through discarded reeds. Clay vessels dry beside walls. Children carry water in jars that seem far too heavy for them. The sanctuary does not overwhelm this village. It stands among familiar structures, built from the same mud and straw. Its authority comes from arrangement rather than scale. Inside, the air feels cooler. Plaster softens the walls and reflects a dim, milky light. The scent of damp clay mixes with smoke, grain, and fish oil. Your steps slow because the room encourages caution. Someone has designed that feeling. The entrance may have required a visitor to move sideways before facing the raised platform. This indirect approach appears in many later Mesopotamian sacred buildings. It prevents anyone from rushing carelessly toward the focal point. Even the most impatient worshipper must turn first. Architecture, apparently, can teach manners. The platform at the end of the room has often been interpreted as an altar. Offerings may have rested there before a divine symbol, sacred object, or image made from perishable material. Wood, reeds, cloth, and painted plaster rarely survive in southern Mesopotamian soil. The room therefore looks emptier today than it once appeared. Colour may have covered its walls. Mats may have softened the floor. Baskets, vessels, lamps, and carved objects may have filled its corners. You're not looking at a complete shrine, you are looking at its skeleton. Pottery found near the earliest levels belongs to communities associated with the Ubaid cultural tradition. Their painted vessels often carried dark geometric designs across pale surfaces, bands, curves, and repeated shapes moved around bowls with quiet precision. Some scholars see similar habits of order within the temple plan: repetition, balance, and controlled movement shaped both object and building. This comparison remains suggestive rather than certain. A painted bowl in a sacred room may share visual discipline without sharing a single symbolic system. Archaeologists must resist making every attractive pattern part of a cosmic code. Still, the temptation is understandable. The shrine's rectangular form creates a clear axis, directing attention through the room. The central space remains open enough for a small gathering. Platforms define places for actions that differ from ordinary cooking, sleeping, or storage. These features support the interpretation of a specialized religious building. They also provide an early model for later temple architecture across southern Mesopotamia. Records from excavations confirm that increasingly elaborate sanctuaries rose above similar foundations. Central halls became larger, side rooms multiplied, facades gained buttresses and recessed surfaces that caught sunlight and shadow. The first shrine contains these later possibilities in miniature. Its importance rests not in grandeur, but in architectural intention. A curious fringe theory claims that the proportions encode advanced astronomical knowledge inherited from unknown teachers. Supporters point toward orientation, repeated ratios, and later stories connecting Enki with wisdom and measurement. The claim remains unsupported by secure evidence. Early builders could observe the sun, stars, water levels, and seasons without receiving mysterious instruction. Human patience is often less glamorous than supernatural tutors, but it accomplishes a surprising amount. The more serious question concerns function. Some historians argue that calling the building a temple imposes later religious categories upon an earlier community. The structure may have served feasting, storage, council meetings, ritual exchange, or several purposes at once. A respected debate among scholars centers on whether sacred and domestic life were already clearly divided. In a small prehistoric settlement, the person distributing grain might also lead ceremonies, settle disputes, and organize canal repairs. Modern labels separate priest, administrator, farmer, and household leader. Early communities may have found such distinctions unnecessarily tidy. You listen for activity within the reconstructed room. There is the scrape of pottery against plaster, the hiss of embers, and the low murmur of several voices. Someone pours grain into a shallow container. Another person places fish upon a raised surface. No crowd applauds, no proclamation follows. The power of the ceremony may rest in repetition. The same gestures return with each season. The same doorway frames each approach. The same platform receives gifts from households whose children eventually bring gifts of their own. Through such repetition, the building acquires memory. Its measurements become familiar to the body. People know how many steps cross the room. They know where to pause and where to lower their gaze. They know which corner belongs to smoke and which remains clean. This physical knowledge may be the true beginning of the blueprint. It is not merely a drawing scratched onto clay. It is a sequence of movements remembered by builders, worshippers, and ritual specialists. The plan survives because people keep performing it. Oxford University research into early urbanism has often stressed that communal buildings helped create shared identities among growing settlements. People did not simply construct temples because cities already existed. Building together may have helped cities come into existence. At Eridu, the sanctuary could have offered a centre for households scattered across a watery landscape. Families separated by channels and marshes might gather there during seasonal rites. Gifts could be exchanged, disputes discussed, and alliances renewed. Religion, economy, and community may have occupied the same room. You notice how little space separates the sacred from the practical. The offering table resembles a work surface. The altar resembles a low platform. The bricks match those used in nearby houses. Only context changes them. A lump of clay becomes sacred because hands place it carefully, generations preserve it, and ceremonies repeatedly gather around it. The blueprint, therefore, depends upon belief as much as measurement. Without belief, the room is simply rectangular. With belief, every corner gains direction. The entrance becomes a threshold. The platform becomes a meeting place between human need and invisible order. The central floor becomes a controlled path through uncertainty. The sanctuary's modest scale makes this transformation easier to feel. You are not dwarfed by royal ambition. You remain close to the builders, close to their materials, and close to the first fragile distinction between ordinary shelter and sacred space. Outside, evening cools the plastered walls. Smoke rises from cooking fires and drifts across the settlement. Water reflects a fading band of bronze light beyond the reeds. Inside, a small lamp trembles near the platform. The flame reveals no statue and offers no explanation. It only traces the room's careful proportions, one wall at a time. Here, the lost blueprint first becomes visible. The air grows cooler as you enter the imagined heart of Enki's sanctuary, where water shapes every thought. Outside, the plain lies dry beneath the sun. Inside, so the room belongs to hidden depths. Enki was known as a god of wisdom, skilled craftsmanship, fertility, and the life-giving waters beneath the earth. His sacred domain was the great freshwater deep, imagined below the soil and beyond ordinary sight. To the people of southern Mesopotamia, this unseen reservoir was not an abstract religious idea. Fresh water determined whether fields produced grain, animals survived, and families endured another season. Rivers brought abundance, but they also carried mud, floodwater, and sudden destruction. Rainfall was limited and uncertain. Communities therefore depended upon canals, wells, marshes, and careful cooperation. Enki represented the intelligence required to manage that difficult world. You stand near a low platform as a clay vessel is placed upon its surface. The vessel contains water drawn from a clean channel before sunrise. Its rim feels cool, and beads of moisture darken the pale clay. A ritual specialist raises the bowl slowly. No loud prayer fills the room. The words remain measured, repeated in a pattern older than anyone present. Water is poured into a shallow basin. The sound is delicate, yet within the silence, it seems to fill the entire sanctuary. Ancient Mesopotamian records identify Enki's temple at Eridu as the house of the freshwater deep. Later scribes described it as a place of radiant order, surrounded by reeds, canals, and creatures of the marsh. The British Museum preserves tablets containing compositions that praise Enki's command over water, knowledge, and civilized skills. These texts were written much later than the earlier shrine, but they preserve traditions rooted deeply in Eridu. They describe a god who does not rule mainly through weapons or storms. He governs through understanding. Enki knows how to shape clay, guide rivers, establish crafts, and assign functions within society. He appears as a planner who brings structure to a world that might otherwise remain confused. This makes his connection with architecture especially meaningful. A temple built for Enki becomes more than a dwelling for a divine presence. It becomes an expression of measured order. Every wall separates one activity from another. Every doorway controls movement. Every platform establishes purpose. The building behaves like a thought made solid. You can almost smell wet reeds stacked near the outer wall. Workers have woven them into mats and screens. Their fingers move quickly, following patterns learned during childhood. Clay plaster is spread over brick surfaces to protect them from heat and moisture. The plaster must be renewed often because salt slowly pushes through the walls. Nothing remains perfect for long. That may have suited Enki's character. His wisdom was practical rather than distant. It belonged to repair, adaptation, and the patient management of fragile things. Researchers at Oxford University have explored how early Mesopotamian communities depended upon collective water control. Canals required planning, labour, maintenance, and agreements between households. A blocked channel could ruin several fields. A neglected bank might collapse and redirect water towards another settlement. Water demanded cooperation. It also created conflict. A deity associated with fresh water therefore stood near the centre of social survival. Enki's authority may have reflected the shared knowledge required to keep an entire community alive. You hear the scrape of a wooden tool against damp earth. Outside, workers clear silt from a narrow channel. Their feet sink into mud, and insects gather above the surface. The labour appears ordinary, but it carries sacred meaning. To maintain water is to preserve the order Enki represents. A temple offering may thank the god for abundance. It may also remind the community that abundance depends upon discipline. One unusual tradition describes Enki as delighting in beer. Clever speech and complicated bargains. In several stories, his wisdom is accompanied by humour, appetite, and occasional mischief. He is not always solemn. Divine intelligence, apparently, may still make questionable decisions after drinking. This quirky character separates Enki from distant, emotionless gods. He feels involved with human weakness because he understands it so well. His solutions are often indirect. He hides knowledge, sends advice through dreams, or finds a narrow path around a dangerous command. That quality may explain why later generations imagined him as humanity's quiet protector. He does not always prevent disaster. Instead, he reveals how survival remains possible. Within the sanctuary, a small model boat may have rested near an offering vessel. Fish bones, shells, reeds, and water birds could also have carried associations with his watery domain. Much of this material would decay or scatter. Archaeology preserves only fragments of the sensory world once created inside the temple. You must rebuild that world carefully. Perhaps painted walls showed flowing lines, fish or bundles of reeds. Perhaps woven hangings moved gently whenever the doorway opened. Perhaps bowls reflected lamplight like small pools. These possibilities remain plausible, but certainty is impossible. A continuing scholarly debate concerns when the earliest shrine became specifically associated with Enki. The later connection is clear, but prehistoric builders left no written dedication. Some scholars argue that the repeated water symbolism of Eridu suggests an ancient continuity. Others warn that later traditions may have reshaped the memory of earlier buildings. A sacred place can inherit a story long after its first walls are built. The earliest sanctuary may have honoured a local power connected with water, fertility, or communal survival. Over centuries, that presence may have developed into the complex divine figure known as Enki. Alternatively, the core identity may have remained surprisingly stable from the beginning. The evidence allows both possibilities. Yale University scholars studying Mesopotamian religion have emphasized that gods were understood through their cities, temples, landscapes, and social roles. A deity was not separated from place. Enki belonged to Eridu as deeply as fresh water belonged beneath the soil. His identity emerged from the city's marshy surroundings, its canals, and its dependence upon hidden resources. This relationship transformed the temple into a map of the world. The floor represented stable land, water basins recalled the deep below, raised platforms lifted sacred objects above ordinary movement. Doorways marked the passage between human space and divine order. The plan could therefore express a complete cosmology without a single written sentence. You move slowly toward the central platform. The room narrows your attention until only the raised surface remains. A bowl stands there, filled with perfectly still water. For a moment, the ceiling and walls disappear within its dark reflection. The surface appears deeper than the vessel containing it. This simple effect may have seemed powerful in a dim interior. Water creates distance where none exists. It opens a downward sky. A fringe interpretation claims that such basins served as devices for receiving messages from hidden beings beneath the earth. No archaeological evidence proves this idea, but it reveals how easily water invites mystery. A dark pool conceals its depth. A reflected face appears both present and unreachable. The people of Eridu did not need strange visitors to understand that feeling. Their daily lives already depended upon forces hidden below mud and reed. Fresh water might rise from a well, seep through soil, or emerge where the ground seemed lifeless. Its source remained unseen, but its effects surrounded them. Enki embodied that invisible generosity. He was not merely the owner of water, he represented the knowledge that allowed water to become civilization. Canals required measurement, fields required boundaries, boats required skilled hands, clay required shaping, firing, and patience. Each craft turned raw material into order. The sanctuary expressed the same transformation. Mud became brick, brick became wall, wall became sacred space. You begin to sense why this god stood at the beginning of so many cultural stories. Enki offered a divine explanation for the human ability to organize the world. Perhaps the builders believed every useful skill descended from his hidden house. Perhaps each carefully aligned brick echoed a pattern already existing in divine thought. The temple then becomes a bridge between two forms of creation. Nature provides clay and water. Intelligence gives them purpose. Outside, the heat presses against the plane. Inside, the bowl remains cool beneath your fingertips. Its water reflects a small flame. The light trembles, but the water holds it. Your feet sink slightly into damp ground as the settlement wakes beneath a pale morning sky. There are no streets, no palace walls, and no written signs naming this place. Only smoke reveals where people live. Thin columns rise from low houses built with clay, reeds, and patient hands. Dogs move between doorways. Goats tug at woven barriers. Somewhere nearby, a stone grinds grain with a steady rasp. The community remains small enough for nearly everyone to recognize every face. Families share wells, pathways, ovens, and the difficult work of keeping water close. Nothing here resembles a city, yet something is beginning. Across the plain, households lie scattered near channels and patches of cultivable soil. Each group depends upon the others more than pride might comfortably admit. One family owns strong cattle. Another knows where fish gather when marsh water retreats. Someone repairs boats, someone shapes pottery, someone remembers when the river last changed course. Survival depends upon exchanged knowledge. The people do not possess writing, so agreements live within voices and gestures. Boundaries are marked with stones, ditches, trees, and memories. A promise remains secure only while witnesses remain alive. When disputes arise, the community must gather. The ritual building offers a place where disagreement can enter one doorway and leave in a calmer form. Its sacred character gives weight to decisions that ordinary conversation might not hold. A shared meal can become an agreement. An offering can become a public promise. A ceremony can turn cooperation into obligation. This is how architecture begins shaping society. Archaeologists studying early settlements across southern Mesopotamia have found evidence of communities growing more connected during the Ubaid period. Similar pottery, building methods, and ritual practices appear across wide distances. Research associated with Harvard University has examined how shared material traditions can reveal networks of exchange and social contact. Objects moved between communities, but ideas travelled with them. A painted bowl could carry more than grain. It could carry a familiar style, a social signal, or a memory of distant relatives. You watch a small boat approach through a narrow channel. Its hull is made from bundled reeds coated with dark bitumen. 2 people sit low inside, protecting baskets from splashing water. They bring shell, dried fish, and stone unavailable near the settlement. The arrival draws attention. Children run toward the bank, adults approach more carefully, measuring the visitors with quiet curiosity. Exchange is never entirely simple. A rare stone might become a cutting tool, ornament, or ritual object. Bitumen could waterproof containers and boats. Shells might decorate clothing or mark status during ceremonies. Every imported material extends the community beyond its horizon. The sanctuary stands near the center of these encounters. Visitors may bring offerings there before trading. Local leaders may welcome strangers within its protected space. Ritual creates rules where trust remains uncertain. You hear voices inside the building, low and deliberate. Several households have gathered to discuss a blocked channel. Silt has slowed the water, and fields farther away are beginning to dry. No single family can solve the problem. The channel must be cleared by many hands. Labour must be divided. Food must support the workers. Someone must decide which fields receive water first. These decisions contain the seeds of administration. There are no officials wearing elaborate robes. There are no written lists recording grain or labour. Authority rests upon reputation, age, skill, kinship, and sacred approval. A respected elder speaks. A ritual specialist listens. Farmers exchange worried looks. The sanctuary gives their agreement a setting larger than any household. Stanford University researchers studying cooperation in early communities have argued that shared rituals can strengthen trust among unrelated groups. Repeated ceremonies create common expectations and reduce uncertainty. The people gathered here may not understand social theory, which is probably fortunate for everyone. They understand something more immediate. You work beside those who honour the same sacred place. That knowledge matters when digging beneath a cruel sun. The community prepares for a seasonal gathering. Women carry baskets of grain toward open courtyards. Men bring fish, reeds, and jars of water. Children collect fuel and attempt to avoid useful work with impressive creativity. Smoke begins drifting above several ovens. Food preparation becomes part of the ceremony. Grain is ground, mixed, shaped, and baked. Fish are cleaned and arranged near hot stones. Beer ferments inside clay vessels sealed with cloth. The scents spread through the settlement, drawing people toward the common space. Feasting may have played an important role in early communal life. Large meals allowed leaders to display generosity while families renewed alliances. Contributions could also reveal which households controlled valuable resources. Hospitality looks gentle, but it can carry sharp political edges. A host who feeds many people gains influence. A family unable to contribute may become dependent. A ritual meal therefore joins devotion with status, gratitude, and quiet competition. No crown is required. You enter the gathering area as sunlight catches painted vessels arranged near the wall. Their patterns curve around pale surfaces, repeating lines that seem to move when the bowl turns. Some designs resemble waves, others suggest nets, plants, or abstract forms with no surviving explanation. A quirky theory proposes that certain Ubaid patterns record maps of waterways or celestial routes. Most scholars remain cautious because repeated geometry can emerge from decoration alone. Still, the designs invite long attention. A bowl passes from hand to hand, carrying food while its painted surface circles the gathering. The object connects movement, vision, and memory. The sanctuary also connects people who may otherwise remain separated by distance. Families living beyond marsh channels cannot visit one another casually. Seasonal ceremonies bring them into physical contact. News travels during these gatherings. A marriage is arranged, a death is announced, a missing boat is discussed. Someone reports strange pottery from a settlement several days away. Oral history expands with each visitor. The building becomes a vessel for information as much as worship. It holds stories, obligations, warnings, and claims of ancestry. A person standing near its platform may speak with unusual authority because sacred space changes how listeners receive ordinary words. The distinction between religion and government remains blurred. Scholars continue debating whether early communal buildings created hierarchy or protected cooperation. One interpretation sees ritual centers as places where influential families accumulated power through offerings and food distribution. Another view suggests these buildings belonged more broadly to the community, limiting private control by placing important activities within shared space. Both patterns may have existed together. A respected household could serve the community while strengthening its own position. Generosity and ambition often drink from the same cup. You observe a ritual specialist distributing portions from a large vessel. Each household receives something. The amounts may not be equal, but the act creates an image of order. People watch closely. Distribution reveals who belongs, who receives honor, and who remains near the edge. Sacred ceremony quietly organizes the social world. The settlement grows through these repeated gatherings. Paths become more permanent because many feet follow them. Storage rooms expand because offerings and surplus grain require protection. Specialized skills gain value. A gifted potter spends less time farming. A boat builder works for several households. A ritual leader devotes more attention to ceremonies, calendars, and inherited knowledge. The community begins supporting people whose work serves everyone. This change is gradual. No single morning transforms villagers into urban citizens. No announcement declares that history has entered a new stage. Complexity gathers like silt. One season adds a storage room, another adds a platform. A successful harvest brings more visitors. A marriage joins distant families. The sanctuary remains the place where these changes become visible. At sunset, people sit outside the building while insects hum above the water. Children sleep against their parents. Older voices continue speaking as darkness spreads across the reeds. No one present knows that future generations will call such communities the ancestors of cities. They simply know the channel needs clearing, the grain needs sharing, and the sacred center must endure. Under the stars, the settlement has no written name, yet it already possesses a memory. The trench descends through compacted clay, and every downward step removes another portion of familiar time. Above your head, sunlight reaches the upper walls. Below, the soil becomes cooler, darker, and strangely still. Archaeologists identify 17 major building levels within the sacred sequence at Eridu. The number does not describe 17 rooms standing together. It describes 17 moments when one sanctuary gives way to another. Each structure rests upon a predecessor. A floor is cleaned for the final time. Doorways are blocked with brick. Walls are leveled or packed with soil. Then builders raise a new sacred house upon the sealed remains. The process resembles burial, but it is not abandonment. The older building remains physically present beneath the new one, supporting its weight and preserving its location. You can feel the mound growing. At first, rebuilding may answer practical needs. Mud brick walls crack, plaster flakes, and groundwater carries destructive salts upward. Roof beams weaken beneath the insects and dampness. A sanctuary exposed for decades cannot remain untouched. Repair eventually becomes insufficient. The community then faces a choice. They can leave the damaged structure and build on fresh ground, or they can remain attached to the established place. At Eridu, they repeatedly choose attachment. Workers carry baskets filled with clean earth and fragments of broken brick. They pour the material into abandoned rooms, pressing it firmly beneath their feet. Low walls disappear beneath layers of packed clay. The old interior becomes a foundation. This method lifts the next building slightly higher above the plain. repeated rebuilding gradually produces an artificial hill, one created through human labour rather than natural geology. The sacred centre rises because its history accumulates underneath it. Researchers connected with the University of Pennsylvania have studied how Mesopotamian settlements developed into mounds through continuous construction. Houses, workshops, streets, and temples were repeatedly rebuilt at nearly identical locations. Eridu offers an especially striking sacred version of this process. Its architectural sequence preserves changes across many centuries, allowing archaeologists to compare one temple plan with another. The walls become a long experiment in continuity. Some sanctuaries remain modest, while others display increasingly elaborate arrangements. Buttresses appear along exterior surfaces. Recessed panels create alternating bands of light and shadow. Central halls grow more clearly defined. Side chambers begin surrounding the principal room, possibly holding offerings, tools, stored goods, or ritual equipment. Entrances become more controlled, directing visitors through increasingly formal approaches. The building develops a stronger sense of hierarchy. Not every person enters every room. Not every offering reaches the same platform. Architecture separates public gathering from restricted activity. You follow an imagined procession through one of these later structures. The exterior wall stands above eye level, its surface broken by projecting brickwork. Sunlight catches each projection, while shadows settle within the recesses. The facade seems to change as you move past it. A doorway opens, but the sacred focus remains concealed. You enter a narrow space and turn. Another opening draws you inward. The route slows your movement, preventing a direct approach toward the central platform. The sanctuary controls the body before any spoken instruction begins. This repeated arrangement suggests that builders preserve more than useful measurements. They preserve a ritual sequence expressed through space. A wall remembers where someone once paused. A threshold remembers who was permitted to cross. A platform remembers the direction from which offerings arrived. Nothing speaks aloud, yet every feature gives instructions. The University of Chicago has supported extensive research into Mesopotamian temple architecture, including the long development from small communal shrines toward monumental institutions. Such studies show that architectural growth often accompanies changes in economic and social organization. Larger buildings require more labor. More labor requires planning, food, tools, and leadership. A sanctuary therefore records authority as clearly as devotion. Someone decides when rebuilding begins, someone gathers workers from surrounding households, someone calculates the bricks, reeds, timber, plaster, and provisions required. Those decisions may belong to elders, ritual specialists, powerful families, or a broader community council. The exact structure remains uncertain. A continuing scholarly debate asks whether early temple expansion reflects centralized control or collective investment. Some historians see emerging priestly authority managing surplus resources and organized labor. Others argue that communal participation remains essential, especially during periods without clear evidence for kings or formal bureaucracies. The buildings permit several readings. A larger sanctuary may represent growing inequality. It may also represent a community capable of undertaking ambitious work together. Most likely, cooperation and hierarchy develop side by side. You hear wooden molds striking the ground as fresh bricks are released beneath the sun. Teams mix clay with water and chopped plant material. Others carry completed bricks toward the rising walls. Children bring small baskets, proud of their contribution. Skilled builders align corners with cords and simple measuring rods. Their tools appear humble, but the resulting plans demonstrate careful control of proportion. Mistakes remain possible. A wall may lean, a foundation may settle unevenly, a doorway may require adjustment when the roof load proves heavier than expected. The blueprint evolves through experience. Builders inherit successful solutions and abandon unsuccessful ones. They learn which wall thickness survives winter moisture. They discover where buttresses prevent collapse. Religious tradition and practical engineering become inseparable. A peculiar fringe idea claims the 17 levels represent 17 stages of cosmic initiation. Supporters imagine each buried sanctuary as one step within a secret ladder connecting earth, water, and heaven. No surviving text supports such a system. The number 17 comes from archaeological classification, not an ancient sacred inscription. Excavators separate phases according to floors, walls, pottery, and rebuilding episodes. Still, the image remains quietly compelling. 17 temples lie below one another, each hidden by the structure that follows. Even without secret numerology, the sequence feels ceremonial. Every rebuilding closes one world and opens another. You picture the final gathering inside an aging sanctuary. Cracks run through the plaster, smoke has darkened the ceiling, and repeated footsteps have polished sections of floor. People know the building will soon disappear. Perhaps they remove sacred vessels and portable images. Perhaps they leave selected objects behind. Perhaps the final ceremony includes food, incense, water, or silence. Archaeology cannot easily distinguish farewell from ordinary use. A vessel found upon a floor may have been forgotten, deliberately deposited, or crushed during construction. Ash may represent a closing ritual, accidental fire, or domestic cleaning. The evidence remains incomplete. This uncertainty gives each sealed room a subdued intimacy. The builders knew they were covering a place filled with memory. They did not destroy it entirely. Instead, they enclosed it beneath the next sanctuary, where it continued bearing the weight of worship. The older walls became invisible participants in every later ceremony. Generations prayed above generations. Such layering may have strengthened claims to authority. A ritual leader serving the newest temple could point to an ancestry extending deep into the mound. The sacred place had endured longer than any living family. Its age offered legitimacy. New leaders could present themselves as guardians of an ancient order, even while changing the building around them. Innovation becomes easier when it appears to preserve tradition. A larger platform can be described as the rightful continuation of a smaller one. Additional rooms can serve old ceremonies while expanding institutional control. The plan changes slowly enough to feel permanent. You stand beside a vertical face left within the excavation. Thin floors appear as horizontal lines crossing the exposed earth. One floor rests above another, separated by packed fill and broken masonry. Together, they resemble the pages of a book whose language consists entirely of soil. The lowest lines are faint, the upper ones become broader, stronger, and more ambitious. Across this ascent, a village sanctuary gradually approaches the scale of a public monument. No single architect designs the complete transformation. Hundreds of builders contribute without seeing its distant result. Each generation answers immediate problems while preserving inherited expectations. That is how the blueprint survives. It is copied imperfectly, repaired repeatedly, and enlarged whenever resources permit. Its authority does not depend upon one original drawing. It depends upon collective memory. Evening shadows settle across the trench, darkening the oldest foundations first. The upper walls remain briefly touched by amber light. Beneath them, 16 buried sanctuaries hold their silence. The newest temple stands because the forgotten ones refuse to vanish. In your ears, the scrape of a trowel becomes the faint rhythm of measured construction. One line of brick meets another, then turns with careful restraint. The exposed walls do not form a random collection of rooms. Their positions reveal repeated choices concerning direction, proportion, access, and sacred focus. A platform rises at one end of the central chamber. A low installation stands nearby, perhaps supporting offerings or ritual equipment. Doorways avoid simple symmetry and guide movement along a deliberate path. The arrangement feels planned. No surviving drawing records the earliest design. No tablet identifies a master builder or lists exact measurements. The blueprint must therefore be recovered from the ruins themselves. You begin with the orientation. The sanctuary follows a consistent relationship between entrance, central hall, and raised sacred area. Visitors do not simply cross an open threshold and face the divine presence immediately. They enter, adjust their direction, and approach gradually. This indirect path creates anticipation. It also allows ritual specialists to control what visitors can see during each moment of movement. A hidden object may remain concealed until the final turn. A lamp might illuminate one platform while leaving surrounding rooms in shadow. Architecture becomes a form of revelation. Researchers at Yale University have examined how ancient sacred buildings organize human attention through controlled movement. Walls do more than support roofs. They shape expectation, posture, and emotional response. You experience this control without hearing a single command. A narrow doorway draws your shoulders inward. A raised floor makes you step carefully. A low ceiling produces intimacy, while a taller chamber encourages awe. The body understands the plan before the mind explains it. At Eridu, repeated construction suggests that such effects were preserved intentionally. Builders altered details, expanded rooms, and reinforced walls, yet certain relationships remained recognizable. The central hall retained its importance. Platforms continued defining one end of the sacred space. Side chambers supported activities that remained separated from the main ritual area. These patterns form the hidden grammar of the temple. Like grammar, they permit change without destroying meaning. A sentence can grow longer while preserving its structure. A sanctuary can gain rooms while maintaining its sacred direction. The blueprint therefore represents a system rather than a single frozen plan. You kneel beside a foundation trench where bricks form a clean corner. The angle looks simple, but producing it requires skill. Builders must choose a starting point, establish straight lines, and keep walls aligned while the ground shifts beneath them. Measuring cords provide guidance, though cords stretch and knots loosen. A wooden rod may establish repeated units. Hands check every course as the wall rises. Builders sight along the surface, correcting small errors before they become dangerous. Practical accuracy protects the roof, sacred accuracy protects the meaning. A platform placed carelessly might disrupt a ceremony. A doorway opened in the wrong wall could expose restricted activity or alter the expected procession. The plan must therefore satisfy both engineering and ritual. Oxford University historians studying ancient measurement have noted that standard units often emerge through repeated practical use. A forearm, hand, pace, or measuring rod becomes reliable when communities agree upon its value. Eridu's earliest builders may not have used the formal systems known from written periods, yet their architecture reveals shared habits of proportion. Walls repeat similar thicknesses. Rooms maintain workable spans. Openings appear where structural pressure can be managed. Knowledge passes through apprenticeship. An experienced builder shows a younger worker how deeply foundations should be cut. He demonstrates how much straw strengthens wet clay without weakening the finished brick. She learns where cracks usually appear and how plaster conceals early damage. Such instruction rarely enters written history. It survives in hands, posture, and repeated practice. The blueprint lives inside the builders. A curious fringe interpretation claims that the temple dimensions preserve a mathematical code derived from the movements of distant planets. Supporters compare wall lengths, angles, and later, Mesopotamian number systems. The evidence does not require such an explanation. Ancient builders were careful observers, and their practical geometry could become sophisticated without hidden celestial messages. Still, sacred architecture often invites numerical speculation because order itself feels meaningful. A measured room appears different from a careless shelter. Its proportions suggest intention, and intention invites questions about whose mind created the pattern. Perhaps ritual specialists described the necessary arrangement. Perhaps builders inherited a plan remembered through models, chords, songs, or ceremonial instructions. A miniature clay building could have served as a teaching object. Marks scratched onto a prepared floor might guide wall placement. No clear example survives from the earliest levels. The absence of a drawing does not prove that drawings never existed. Mud surfaces can be smoothed away. Wooden boards decay. Reed mats disappear. Knowledge may have been recorded upon materials that archaeology rarely preserves. A serious scholarly debate concerns whether the architectural continuity reflects a conscious sacred canon or simple practical conservatism. Some historians argue that builders repeated successful layouts because communities associated them with divine approval. Others suggest that familiar techniques reduced risk, labour, and confusion. The two explanations need not conflict. A practical form can acquire sacred meaning through long use. A doorway remains in its position because the wall stands securely there. Then tradition teaches that the god prefers that entrance. Engineering becomes theology. You watch a master builder stretch a core between two wooden stakes. Several workers wait while he adjusts the line. His authority comes from experience. He knows how the finished wall will appear long before the first course reaches knee height. Nearby, a ritual leader observes the alignment. Perhaps she checks whether the sacred platform will face the correct direction. Perhaps she recites words that transform ordinary construction into consecrated work. The builders and ritual specialists depend upon each other. One group gives the sanctuary physical stability. The other gives its measurements inherited legitimacy. Neither role remains entirely separate. A skilled builder may understand ceremonial requirements. A priest may know how water damages foundations or how roof beams distribute weight. Early institutions rarely respect the neat professional categories preferred by modern paperwork. The plan grows through negotiation. A storage chamber must be accessible without disturbing worship. A preparation room needs ventilation. Offerings require protection from insects, moisture, and curious children. Smoke must escape somewhere. Drainage becomes especially important. Water used for purification cannot simply collect beneath the floor. Channels or absorbent surfaces may carry it away. The sacred building contains practical problems at every corner, yet practical solutions can deepen symbolism. A narrow drain may represent the return of water to the hidden deep. A raised platform protects offerings from dampness, while also lifting them toward divine attention. One feature performs several functions. This layered meaning makes the blueprint difficult to decipher. Archaeologists identify walls and surfaces, but they must infer the actions once performed around them. A low bench could hold vessels, seated officials, sacred images, or baskets of grain. A side room might store offerings, prepare food, or shelter ritual specialists. Context helps, but certainty remains rare. You walk slowly along the central axis. Each step reveals how the plan concentrates attention. The surrounding rooms remain secondary. Their doors open towards service, preparation, or controlled access. The main chamber gathers movement and directs it toward one end. This arrangement resembles later Mesopotamian temples, where the sacred image often occupied a prominent raised position. The deity's presence organized the entire building. At Eridu, the earliest form of that principle may already be visible. The temple is not designed around the comfort of visitors. It is designed around a divine center. Human beings approach, present, wait, and withdraw. The god remains symbolically fixed while everything else moves. This relationship may be the most enduring part of the blueprint. Walls change, rooms multiply, and platforms grow larger. Still, the building continues teaching the same spatial lesson. Order has a center. You leave the chamber as the light begins fading across the excavated floor. Shadows gather inside doorways, making the missing walls seem briefly complete. The plan is still present. Though its roof has vanished and its builders have no names, measured space has outlived memory. The scent of warm reeds settles around you as dawn spreads across a broad sheet of shallow water. Eridu no longer stands within a barren plain. It rises beside marshes alive with wings, ripples, and hidden movement. The horizon gleams like polished metal. Channels divide the wetland into winding paths that shift with silt, wind, and seasonal changes. Reed beds rise higher than a person, their narrow leaves whispering whenever the air moves through them. Small boats glide between these green walls. Their hulls barely disturb the water, though fish scatter beneath each passing shadow. This landscape provides food, shelter, transport, fuel, and building material. It also creates uncertainty, since a familiar route can disappear beneath new mud. The people of Eridu learn to read subtle signs. They notice the colour of water, the flight of birds, and the angle of reeds along a channel. A pale line upon the bank reveals falling water. Floating plants indicate a quiet pool. Dark clouds along the northern horizon may promise distant weather without bringing useful rain. Such knowledge carries immense value. The ancient settlement occupies a region shaped by the Euphrates River and the changing coastline of the Persian Gulf. Geological studies show that southern Mesopotamia experienced major shifts in waterways, marshes, and shorelines across thousands of years. Research conducted through the University of Chicago has helped scholars reconstruct this fluid environment using sediments, settlement patterns, and ancient geographical records. The resulting picture is far wetter than the modern desert suggests. Eridu once belonged to a world of water. Its inhabitants may have seen the settlement as firm ground surrounded by restless creation. Claybanks emerged from channels, while islands appeared and vanished beneath seasonal floods. Land itself seemed temporary. A sacred building placed upon stable ground could therefore represent more than communal devotion. It could symbolize order rising from a watery beginning. Later Mesopotamian traditions imagined creation as a separation of waters, earth, and sky. Eridu's physical setting made such stories feel immediate rather than distant. Every sunrise repeated the drama. Mist lifted from the marsh surface. Mud appeared beneath retreating water. Birds descended upon newly exposed ground, filling the silence with sharp cries. The sanctuary stood where wetness became habitable land. You step into a reed boat as a fisherman pushes away from the bank. His pole sinks deeply into soft mud, then bends while the vessel slides forward. The boat smells of bitumen, damp fibre, and yesterday's catch. Water taps gently against the hull. Around you, reeds provide nesting places for birds and shelter for wild pigs. Their roots hold mud together, while their stalks become mats, baskets, fences, roofs, and bundles of fuel. Few plants serve so many purposes. Builders cut mature reeds near their bases and tie them into thick bundles. Some form light roofing supports. Others create screens that filter sunlight and allow air to pass through. Reed mats may cover temple floors, softening footsteps during ceremonies. Woven panels might divide rooms or conceal preparations from ordinary visitors. The landscape enters the sanctuary through its materials. Mud from the waterways becomes brick. Water mixes the plaster. Reeds strengthen walls and support roofs. Fish, shells, birds, and grain arrive as offerings. The sacred building is made from the world it explains. Harvard University researchers examining early Mesopotamian societies have emphasized the importance of wetland resources within emerging settlements. Fishing, herding, cultivation, and gathering could support communities through different seasons. Such variety reduced dependence upon a single harvest. It also required detailed knowledge of several environments, each governed by its own rhythms. Farmers watched canals and fields, fishers watched currents and spawning grounds, herding families followed grazing conditions along drier margins. Their lives overlapped at Eridu. The sanctuary may have offered a shared centre for people whose daily work carried them into different parts of the landscape. Offerings gathered these separate worlds into one interior. A basket of dates represented cultivated gardens, a fish recalled open water, a bundle of wool carried the dry pasture into the sacred room. Each gift mapped a portion of creation. You imagine vessels arranged near the platform, their contents chosen with deliberate care. Clean water stands beside grain, oil, and marsh products. The arrangement may express gratitude, but it also declares dependence. Human life exists because many fragile systems continue working together. A damaged canal could isolate a field. Excess salt could weaken crops. Treating water might reduce fish and strand boats far from useful channels. The environment gave generously, yet never without conditions. This tension shaped Enki's sacred identity. His freshwater realm promised abundance hidden beneath unstable surfaces. The temple associated with him could embody the hope that unseen order continued supporting visible life. A fringe tradition claims Eridu once possessed a mysterious sacred pool whose waters never fell, even during severe drought. No excavated feature confirms such a miraculous basin. The story probably grows from Enki's connection with inexhaustible freshwater. Still, it captures a longing shared by every community living beside uncertain channels. They wished for water that remained dependable. Ordinary pools did not grant that comfort. They evaporated, became salty, or filled with reeds and insects. Sacred imagination provided what geography refused to guarantee. A quieter scholarly debate concerns Eridu's precise relationship with the ancient coastline. Some reconstructions place the settlement near extensive marshes connected closely with the Gulf. Other researchers suggest a more complicated pattern of inland channels. Lagoons and shifting river mouths, sediments have moved repeatedly, making ancient shorelines difficult to trace. The argument matters because landscape influences meaning. A temple beside open coastal water evokes travel, tides, and distant exchange. A temple surrounded by the inland marshes suggests hidden channels, fertile mud, and enclosed fresh water. Eridu may have experienced several of these settings across its long life. The world changed around the sanctuary. Channels migrated. Marsh edges withdrew, salt accumulated within soils, communities adjusted their routes and fields while preserving the sacred centre. Perhaps this environmental change strengthened the temple's authority. The building appeared stable while the surrounding landscape repeatedly altered its shape. Its foundations promised continuity. You travel deeper into the reeds as afternoon light turns golden. Dragonflies hover above still pools. A heron stands motionless near the bank, watching the water with almost priestly patience. Then its head strikes downward. The sudden movement breaks the calm, and ripples spread through reflected skew. Such scenes may have entered religious symbolism. Birds moved between water, earth, and air, crossing boundaries that confined human bodies. Fish vanished beneath surfaces and returned without warning. Snakes emerged from mud. Turtles carried miniature landscapes upon their backs. The marsh seemed filled with creatures capable of passing between worlds. Enki's domain was therefore not empty water. It was a hidden region alive with intelligence, fertility, and transformation. Temple decoration may have drawn upon this environment, though fragile materials leave few traces. Painted plaster could have shown flowing water or marsh animals. Carved objects may have represented fish, goats, turtles, or birds. Woven hangings could have repeated reed patterns familiar to every visitor, even without decoration. Sound carried the landscape indoors. Wind pressed against reed roofing, birds called across the water, insects hummed near lamps, boats creaked against wooden stakes beside the settlement. Sacred silence was never complete. The temple listened to the marsh. As evening approaches, smoke from hearths drifts low across the channels. The sinking sun turns every pool into a narrow strip of copper. Families guide their boats home through passages almost invisible to strangers. Their poles touch the bottom with soft, regular knocks. You remain near the sanctuary while darkness gathers among the reeds. Its walls appear to rise from the same mud that holds their foundations. Water surrounds the settlement, reflects the stars, and disappears into the blackness. The temple stands between depth and sky. It does not conquer the landscape, it translates it. Cold clay presses between your fingers as workers knead soil beside a shallow mixing pit. Water darkens the earth, while chopped reeds disappear beneath bare hills. The mixture must remain neither too wet nor too dry. Too much water weakens the brick. Too little prevents the clay from binding properly. Experience decides the balance. A builder lifts a heavy lump and presses it into a wooden mould. He smooths the top with one practiced movement, then raises the frame. A fresh brick rests beneath the sun. Rows of identical blocks stretch across the open ground. They dry slowly in the heat, turning from dark brown to a lighter, dusty shade. No furnace hardens most of them. Sun-dried brick remains the principal building material because southern Mesopotamia offers abundant clay but little accessible stone. Timber is also scarce, especially in the lower plains. The landscape provides mud generously. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have shown how ancient Mesopotamian architecture depended upon constant maintenance. Sun-dried bricks could support large buildings, but moisture and salt attacked them relentlessly. Walls required protection through plaster, drainage, and regular repair. Roofs needed attention after rain. Lower courses often suffered first, absorbing dampness from the soil. A temple was never truly finished. Its survival depended upon recurring labour. Season after season, fresh plaster covered cracks. Damaged bricks were removed. New layers strengthened vulnerable surfaces. Sacred permanence emerged from endless repair. You watch a woman inspect a drying brick by pressing a thumb against one edge. The surface holds firm, but the centre remains damp. She turns it carefully. Nearby children gather straw, though their concentration drifts whenever insects rise from the mixing pit. Older workers sort reeds according to length and strength. Everyone contributes something. Brick production can absorb an entire community. Soil must be dug, water carried, fibres chopped, moulds prepared, and finished blocks transported toward the construction site. Food must support the labourers. Someone grinds grain for bread, someone brews beer, someone watches the youngest children while stronger hands work beside the walls. The temple rises through many ordinary tasks. No single brick appears impressive. It fits comfortably between two hands and carries no visible mystery. Yet thousands of such objects can enclose a sacred chamber, support a roof, and lift a platform above damp ground. Repetition creates monumentality. The builders understand this instinctively. They place each brick against another, filling joints with wet mud and checking the wall's alignment. A misplaced block can be corrected quickly. A crooked course left unnoticed becomes a greater problem as the wall rises. Patience protects the structure. The work follows a rhythm shaped by the weather. Bricks dry best beneath steady heat, but sudden rain can ruin entire rows. Workers may cover them with the reed mats when clouds gather. Strong wind coats wet surfaces with dust, while extreme heat can crack them too rapidly. Construction therefore becomes a conversation with the sky. The temple plan may feel divine, but its walls remain vulnerable to ordinary conditions. A careless morning can weaken a sacred room for years. This fragility gives the building a curious intimacy. Stone monuments can appear separate from human life. Mud brick never allows such distance. It carries fingerprints, reed impressions, footprints, and accidental marks. Every wall begins as earth touched by people. You move beside a newly built surface while plasterers prepare a finer clay mixture. They spread it across the bricks with flat tools and damp hands. The rough joints disappear. A smooth wall emerges, pale beneath the sun. It reflects heat and creates a cleaner interior. While protecting the bricks from direct exposure, several coats may be applied. The final surface could receive paint, whitewash, or decorative impressions. Even simple colour would transform the room when the oil lamps flickered across it. The sanctuary would appear renewed. Plaster also hides the labour beneath it. Once the wall becomes smooth, individual bricks vanish from sight. The community sees unity instead of separate pieces. Perhaps this carried symbolic meaning. Many households contribute materials and labour, but the completed temple presents one sacred body. Individual effort dissolves into collective form. A curious fringe belief claims that builders sometimes mixed hair, fingernail clippings, or personal tokens into temple bricks to bind themselves spiritually to the structure. Archaeology offers no firm evidence for such a custom at early Eridu. Plant fibres and animal matter can enter clay for practical reasons without carrying ritual meaning. Still, the idea reflects something emotionally plausible. People often wish to leave part of themselves inside building they expect to outlive them. The builders of Eridu already leave traces through touch. A thumbprint survives on one brick. A sandal edge cuts across another before it dries. These marks are rarely intentional, yet they become the closest thing to signatures from a world without writing. You lower your hand beside one ancient impression. The print is smaller than expected. Perhaps it belonged to a young worker carrying bricks toward an unfinished wall. Perhaps it came from someone repairing damage after a storm. No name remains. The mark preserves one moment of pressure, then silence. At Stanford University, research into early collective labour has explored how large construction projects strengthen social identity. Shared work can create loyalty, obligation, and memory beyond individual households. Building a temple gives the community a story about itself. People remember who carried water during a severe summer. They remember which family supplied reeds when the marsh harvest failed. They remember the wall that collapsed and the argument over how it should be rebuilt. Such memories attach themselves to the structure. A child who watches the sanctuary rise may return decades later as an elder supervising repairs. The same corner then carries two lives within it. Architecture becomes personal chronology. You hear workers discussing the correct brick size. Some prefer larger blocks because walls rise faster. Others argue that smaller bricks are easier to carry and place accurately. The disagreement sounds practical, but deeper questions hide inside it. Who controls the construction method? Who provides moulds? Who decides when enough labour has been contributed? A continuing scholarly debate asks whether increasingly regular bricks indicate trained specialists or simply improved communal coordination. Researchers at Yale University have considered both possibilities when studying early Mesopotamian building systems. Standardization can suggest centralized control. It can also emerge when neighboring households copy an efficient technique. Shared molds do not automatically prove a powerful temple administration. The bricks cannot reveal who issued instructions. They only show that agreement existed. Perhaps a respected builder established common dimensions. Perhaps ritual leaders insisted that certain walls follow inherited proportions. Perhaps every household produced bricks at home, then delivered them during construction season. Several systems may have operated together. You picture stacks arriving from different parts of the settlement. Slight variations reveal separate hands, separate clay sources, and separate drying conditions. Workers sought the best blocks for exterior walls. Weaker bricks fill internal spaces where pressure remains lower. Nothing is wasted. Broken pieces become packing material. Old walls are dismantled and reused. Crumbled plaster returns to the mixing pit. The temple consumes its own remains. This recycling is practical, though, but it also carries memory into new construction. Fragments of an older sanctuary may enter the walls of its replacement. The building changes while physically retaining pieces of itself. A brick once placed near an altar can later support a storage room. Sacred location shifts, yet material continuity remains. The people may not discuss this in abstract terms, they simply know old clay still serves. Memory does not require philosophy. It can survive through reuse. The sun sinks lower, and long shadows stretch across the drying field. Workers begin covering unfinished rows with woven mats. The mixing pit grows quiet. Freshly plastered walls hold the day's final light, glowing softly above footprints, discarded reeds, and empty water jars. Nothing about the scene appears eternal. Everything depends upon weather, maintenance, cooperation, and care. Yet the sanctuary endures because each generation accepts that fragility. They rebuild what weakens and renew what begins to fade. The temple is not permanent despite being made from mud. It is permanent because people remember to return. The smell reaches you first. It is faint, smoky, and mixed with damp clay. Beneath it lingers the sharp scent of fish heated over an open flame. Inside the sanctuary, shallow bowls rest near a low installation. Their contents have vanished, but tiny bones remain trapped within ash and soil. Archaeologists found fish remains in several temple levels at Eridu. The deposits appeared near places interpreted as altars, offering tables or ceremonial hearths. This discovery seems perfectly suited to Enki. His sacred world belonged to fresh water, marshes, canals, and the sad abundance hidden beneath their surfaces. Fish moved through that world as living signs of nourishment and mystery. They appeared without planting. They required no plough, no field boundary, and no long season of cultivation. A well-placed net could transform quiet water into food within moments. To a community watching every grain harvest anxiously, that gift must have seemed remarkable. You stand beside a fisherman preparing an offering at sunrise. He carries a woven basket darkened by water and river mud. Inside, several fish shine beneath a layer of wet reeds. Their scales reflect pale light as the basket enters the temple. The fish are not simply leftovers. Someone selected them, transported them, cleaned them, and placed them within a sacred setting. Each action turned ordinary food into a deliberate gift. A ritual specialist receives the basket. She examines the catch, perhaps judging its freshness, size, and suitability. Certain fish may be accepted, while others return to the household kitchen. Selection creates distinction. The chosen fish are laid upon a shallow surface near glowing embers. Smoke rises slowly, carrying the scent toward the roof. The offering may be cooked completely, and it may only be warmed, scorched, or symbolically touched by flame. Archaeology cannot always reveal the precise gesture. Bones survive, but intention does not. Research connected with the University of Chicago has shown that fish formed an important part of the southern Mesopotamian diet. Marshes and waterways supported many species, providing protein alongside grain, dates, and livestock products. Fishing required specialized knowledge. People understood seasonal movement, water depth, spawning patterns, and the behavior of different species. They used nets, hooks, traps, baskets, spears, and enclosed channels. Every method depended upon close observation. A fisherman knew when the water looked empty but was not. He noticed small ripples, disturbed mud, and the sudden movement of birds above a pool. Such knowledge could appear almost supernatural to outsiders. A skilled fisher returned with food from a surface that showed nothing. This may have strengthened the symbolic connection between fish and hidden abundance. They emerged from unseen depths, much as fresh water itself seemed to rise from beneath the earth. Enki governed both mystery and practical skill. The offering therefore carried several meanings at once. It thanked the god for food, acknowledged his watery domain, and honoured the knowledge required to survive within it. You hear a knife scraping scales from a fish beside the temple wall. The sound is soft and repetitive. Scales gather upon a reed mat like tiny pieces of silver. Some may be left attached during cooking, others might be removed before the offering enters the central chamber. The preparation itself could have followed rules. Clean water may wash the fish. Particular vessels may hold the remains. Certain people may handle the offering, while others observe from a distance. Ritual often begins where ordinary habits become unusually precise. A council decree from a much later Mesopotamian city confirms that temples could receive fish as regular economic deliveries. Fishermen sometimes owed part of their catch to religious institutions. Eridu's earliest deposits belong to a different social world, yet they hint at the deep roots of that relationship. The temple did not merely consume symbols, it consumed food. Offerings might support ritual specialists, labourers, visitors, and communal feasts. A fish presented to the god could eventually feed human participants. This does not make the ceremony insincere. In many ancient societies, divine and human consumption belong to the same sacred exchange. Smoke, aroma, and symbolic portions reach the god. While the community shared the remaining food, the offering moved through several forms of belonging. First it belonged to the water, then it belonged to the fisher, then it belonged to the sanctuary. Finally, it may have belonged to everyone gathered there. You imagine a meal beginning outside the sacred room. Clay bowls pass between seated families. Fish flesh is mixed with herbs, grain, or oil. Bread absorbs the juices, while children wait impatiently for their portion. Conversation remains subdued near the temple. The meal creates fellowship, but it also displays order. Important people may receive selected cuts or larger shares. Ritual distribution reveals rank without requiring a speech. A curious fringe claim suggests that fish offerings at Eridu honoured visitors who arrived from the sea and taught humanity sacred knowledge. Supporters connect this idea with later stories about wise beings dressed in fish-like forms. They imagine ancient teachers emerging from the water carrying laws, crafts, and astronomy. The archaeological deposits do not support such a conclusion. Fish bones prove that fish were present. They do not prove that aquatic instructors attended temple ceremonies. Still, the legend reflects an enduring association between water and wisdom. A creature emerging from hidden depths easily becomes a messenger. Its arrival feels like knowledge crossing a boundary. The people of Eridu may have shared similar feelings without imagining visitors from distant stars or forgotten oceans. Their mystery was local. It waited beneath the nearest pool. Oxford University scholars studying ritual food have emphasised that animal remains must be interpreted carefully. A bone near an altar may represent sacrifice, cooking, refuse, or several activities combined. Location matters, but location alone cannot settle every question. Some fish remains at Eridu appear in context that supports ceremonial interpretation. Their concentration near sacred installations makes ordinary disposal less likely, yet a scholarly debate remains open. Were the fish burned as offerings, prepared for communal meals, or discarded from repeated temple feasts? Each explanation fits part of the evidence. Burning can leave distinctive changes upon bone, but heat exposure varies. A lightly scorched fish may leave different traces from one placed directly within a fire. Soil conditions also damage delicate remains. Small bones disappear easily during excavation, especially when early methods do not use fine screens and careful flotation. The surviving sample may therefore represent only part of the original deposit. You watch the imagined flames settle beneath a clay vessel. Oil crackles against heated fish skin. Smoke curls upward and gathers near the roof beams. The smell spreads beyond the doorway, drawing attention across the settlement. Everyone knows something sacred is happening. No inscription explains the ceremony. No hymn survives from this early moment. The evidence consists of bone, ash, architecture, and repetition. That may seem frustrating, yet repetition gives the deposits weight. A single fish bone could arrive accidentally. Repeated concentrations near ceremonial features suggest habit. Habit becomes tradition. Perhaps each fishing season opened with an offering. Perhaps the first catch from a newly cleared channel belonged to Enki. Perhaps families brought fish during periods of drought, hoping hidden waters would remain generous. The ceremony could also mark danger. Fishing involved deep mud, sudden currents, sharp reeds, storms, and creatures concealed beneath the surface. A boat could overturn without warning. An offering might ask for safe return. The temple then became a place where risk entered sacred order. Families surrendered part of their catch in exchange for protection, gratitude, or restored balance. You notice a small bowl placed beside the larger vessel. It may contain salt, herbs, oil, or clean water. Each ingredient transforms the fish. Salt preserves, oil enriches, water cleanses, and fire changes flesh into aroma and nourishment. The ritual gathers natural forces within one controlled act. Fish taken from darkness meets flame, its body becomes food, smoke, memory, and evidence. Centuries pass, and the meal disappears almost completely. Soft tissue vanishes, wood decays, woven mats collapse into stains, only the hardest fragments remain. A vertebra rests within grey ash. A jawbone lies beside the broken pottery. A cluster of scales leaves a faint mineral trace. These small objects carry an enormous burden. They must speak for the fisher, the ritual specialist, the household, the god, and the silent room. You lean closer to the deposit as evening light fades across the excavation. The bones look ordinary, yet they preserve one of Eridu's most intimate mysteries. Someone once carried food from the water and placed it carefully before an unseen presence. The reason remains hidden. The gesture survives. The cold edge of a doorway brushes your shoulder as you enter a room shaped by restraint. Nothing inside demands attention loudly. The space works through sense, distance, and controlled movement. A narrow passage turns you outwards from the central chamber. Another opening appears ahead, partly hidden by a projecting wall. You cannot see the raised platform from where you stand. That concealment is deliberate. The temple plan does not reveal every sacred area at once. Some rooms welcome movement, while others deny it. A visitor must follow a route established by walls, thresholds, and unseen rules. Architecture decides who approaches. The central chamber remains the building's ceremonial heart, yet surrounding rooms serve equally important purposes. Some may hold vessels, food offerings, woven textiles, tools, or objects used only during ritual. Others may prepare participants before they enter the sacred hall. Water could be poured over the hands, clothing might be adjusted, spoken formulas may be repeated in quiet voices. Each room changes the visitor. You hear sandals scrape against plastered floors. The sound grows softer as people enter the interior. Conversation falls away, not because someone commands silence, but because the building encourages it. The walls narrow your attention. Light enters through doorways, roof openings, or small vents placed high above eye level. Its movement across the interior changes throughout the day. Morning light may touch one wall. Afternoon light may reach a platform from another direction. Ritual specialists could use these changes to shape ceremony. A sacred object hidden in darkness might appear suddenly when a door opens. Smoke might catch sunlight, making the air itself live. Research associated with Yale University has explored how ancient religious spaces guided sight and movement. Mesopotamian temples often used indirect approaches rather than simple, open paths toward the divine image. The worshipper did not enter as an equal guest. He approached carefully, turning through controlled spaces before reaching the room where divine presence was concentrated. This arrangement protected sacred objects from casual view. It also created emotional distance between human visitors and the unseen power dwelling within. Distance becomes part of worship. You pause beside a side chamber no larger than a storage closet. Its walls show no decoration, yet its position near the central hall suggests importance. Perhaps sealed jars once stood here. They may have contained grain, oil, beer, clean water, or scented substances used during offerings. Wooden shelves could hold bowls, baskets, lamps, and cloth. Nothing valuable needs to glitter. A small jar of purified oil may matter more than an entire room of ordinary goods. Its sacred value comes from preparation, restriction, and intended use. Only certain hands may open it. The temple therefore creates several levels of access. An outer area belongs to many people. An inner chamber belongs to fewer. The most restricted place may belong symbolically to the god alone. A ritual specialist crosses thresholds that ordinary visitors never pass. Her role gives her permission, but permission also carries danger. A mistake near the sacred center could threaten more than personal reputation. It might disturb the balance between community and divine order. Rules protect both sides. You imagine a wooden door closing behind her. The latch falls into place with a dull sound. Outside, worshippers wait. Inside, she lights a lamp and prepares an offering before an image hidden from public sight. The god does not need to appear physically for the room to feel occupied. Presence can be created through expectation. A platform remains empty, yet nobody treats it as unused. A vessel stands untouched because everyone believes it belongs to someone invisible. The building teaches people how to behave toward absence. This may be one of sacred architecture's most remarkable achievements. It turns empty space into inhabited space through shared belief. A room becomes powerful because nobody enters casually. Archaeological records confirm that later Mesopotamian temples contained sequences of courtyards, halls, storerooms, kitchens, and restricted sanctuaries. These spaces supported both worship and daily administration. Eridu preserves an early stage of that development. Its room suggests that ritual already required preparation, storage, movement, and separation. Sacred activity was not limited to one platform. The entire building participated. A doorway could mark purification, a side room could transform food into an offering, a corridor could control the order of participants. The temple functioned through relationships between spaces. Stanford University scholars studying ritual behavior have emphasized that repeated movement can shape memory more powerfully than spoken explanation. People remember where they turned, paused, waited, and lowered their gaze. Their bodies learn the ceremony. A child entering for the first time watches older relatives carefully. She notices where they stop speaking and where they remove dusty sandals. Years later, she performs the same gestures without needing instruction. The blueprint passes through posture. This inherited movement gives authority to the walls. Even if a doorway changes slightly during rebuilding, the expected ritual path may remain familiar. Builders must therefore respect invisible roots. They are not only constructing rooms, they are preserving choreography. A curious fringe idea proposes that certain chambers were designed to amplify whispered messages from priests hidden behind walls. Supporters imagine hollow spaces, concealed passages, or acoustic tricks that made divine voices seem to emerge from nowhere. No firm evidence supports such devices at early Eridu. Still, sound behaves strangely inside small plastered rooms. A voice from a side chamber may travel through a doorway while its speaker remains unseen. Footsteps can echo unexpectedly. A simple architectural effect might easily deepen religious experience without deliberate deception. The unseen speaker and unseen god could briefly occupy the same mystery. You test the room with a quiet breath, The sound returns faintly from the wall. No miracle occurs. Yet the interior feels different because silence makes every noise meaningful. A dropped bead becomes startling. A vessel placed on plaster produces a sharp, final note. The temple trains attention. Oxford University historians have examined how ancient religious institutions used controlled access to express hierarchy. Restricted rooms could strengthen the authority of those allowed to enter them. Knowledge becomes valuable when it is hidden. A ritual specialist knows which vessel belongs in which chamber. She knows which doorway remains closed during certain ceremonies. She knows what stands behind the wall. That knowledge separates her from ordinary visitors. The temple plan therefore organizes social power alongside sacred power, Sadia. Yet the relationship remains debated. Some scholars interpret restricted rooms as evidence for an emerging priestly class. Others argue that access may have rotated among households, elders, or community representatives. The architecture proves separation. It does not identify everyone who controlled the doors. A respected fisher might enter during one ceremony, a grainkeeper might enter during another. A particular family could maintain one chamber for several generations. Authority may have been shared unevenly. The building allows several arrangements. You move toward the central hall, but a low wall interrupts the direct route. You turn left, pass through another opening, then approach from the side. The movement feels slower than necessary. That is precisely its purpose. A direct path belongs to ordinary travel. Sacred approach requires delay. Delay creates anticipation, and anticipation changes perception. By the time you reach the platform, the room feels larger than its measurements suggest. The hidden route has prepared you. A lamp burns near the far wall. Its flame reveals only part of the chamber. The platform remains visible, but whatever once stood upon it has disappeared. Perhaps a wooden image decayed. Perhaps a symbol was removed before abandonment. Perhaps the sacred presence was never represented in human form. The empty place still controls the room. You feel your attention drawn toward it, just as countless visitors once directed theirs. The surviving walls continue performing their oldest task. They guide the living towards something absent. Outside, daily life continues with laughter, bargaining, animals, and household noise. Inside, every doorway reduces that world. One room removes distraction, another removes light, another removes ordinary permission. At the deepest point, only expectation remains. The temple does not explain the invisible power it serves. It creates conditions in which that power can be felt. Walls conceal it, thresholds protect it, silence gives it shape. Cool air gathers near the floor as you enter a chamber where water waits inside a broad clay basin. The surface remains dark, even while lamplight moves across the surrounding plaster. You lean closer. Your reflection appears beside the flame, then breaks when a single drop falls from the vessel above. The people of Eridu imagine fresh water extending beneath the visible world. They call this hidden realm the Abzu, a deep source lying below fields, houses, canals, and graves. It is not merely an underground lake, it is the unseen foundation of life. Wells draw from it. Springs reveal it. Moisture rising through soil seems to confirm its presence beneath every step. The earth appears dry, yet water waits below. This belief emerges naturally within southern Mesopotamia, where surface water can turn muddy, salty, or unreliable. Freshness feels precious because it separates survival from thirst, crop failure, and disease. A clean vessel of water carries quiet authority. Ritual specialists may wash their hands before approaching sacred objects. They may rinse bowls, purify floors, or sprinkle water across participants. Each gesture does more than remove dirt, it restores order. The sanctuary of Enki represents the earthly meeting place between human settlement and the hidden freshwater deep. Its sacred chambers give architectural form to something nobody can fully see. A basin becomes a miniature Abzu. A channel becomes a path from the unseen world. A raised platform becomes stable land above mysterious depth. The entire building rests symbolically upon water. Ancient compositions preserved in the British Museum describe Enki dwelling within a radiant house connected with the deep. Water surrounds his domain, while wisdom flows outward from it towards cities, crafts, and human institutions. The imagery joins knowledge with hidden sources. Wisdom, like groundwater, cannot always be seen directly. Its presence becomes known through what it makes possible. A canal reaches dry fields because someone understands slope and distance. A boat survives because someone knows reeds, bitumen, current, and balance. A temple stands because builders understand weight. Enki governs these quiet forms of intelligence. You hear a ritual vessel being filled from a larger jar. The stream strikes clay with a hollow sound, then settles into silence. Nobody speaks during the pourings. The action demands attention because water enters sacred use at that moment. It is no longer simply carried from a well, it has crossed a boundary. Perhaps a prayer names its purity. Perhaps a gesture identifies its divine source. Perhaps the vessel itself remains restricted to temple service. The transformation depends upon agreement. Yale University historians studying Mesopotamian religion have observed that sacred water often appears within rites of cleansing, protection, healing, and renewal. These practices reflect both spiritual ideas and practical concerns about contamination. Water removes dust, blood, grease, and decay. It also removes invisible disorder. A person troubled by illness, misfortune, or guilt may be washed symbolically, allowing the community to imagine restoration through a physical act. The water touches skin, but the ritual reaches memory. You watch droplets run along a worshipper's hands. They gather at the fingertips and fall onto the plastered floor. A servant wipes the surface carefully. Used sacred water may require controlled disposal. It cannot always be thrown outside like ordinary waste. A small drain or channel could return it toward the earth. The action completes a cycle. Water rises from hidden depth, enters ritual space, absorbs impurity, then returns below. The temple becomes a machine of circulation, joining the human body with the structure of the cosmos. This interpretation remains possible, though the earliest buildings provide limited evidence for elaborate drainage rituals. Archaeologists find surfaces, channels, basins, and vessels, meaning must be reconstructed from later texts. Material context and comparison. The result is persuasive, but never perfect. Researchers at the University of Oxford continue debating how directly later Mesopotamian theology can explain prehistoric architecture. One view sees strong continuity between Eridu's earliest sanctuaries and the written tradition surrounding Enki. Another view warns that centuries of change separate the first buildings from the surviving compositions. A name preserved late cannot automatically explain every earlier wall. Still, sacred places often carry memories across enormous spans. Rituals change slowly when communities believe ancient practice guarantees divine favour. The connection may therefore preserve a genuine core, even if later poets reshape it. You sense that uncertainty within the basin. It clearly held water. What nobody knows is which words were spoken above it. A curious tradition claims Enki's temple contained a doorway leading physically into the Abzu. Later imagination sometimes pictured sacred chambers as entrances to divine regions beneath the earth. No excavated passage descends into an endless freshwater world. The idea belongs to mythology, not engineering. Yet temple architecture can make metaphor feel physical. A dark stair, covered basin, or restricted room can suggest depth without requiring a literal tunnel. Humans need only a threshold. The mind supplies the hidden distance. A priest disappears behind a wall carrying a water jar. When he returns, the water may be described as drawn from Enki's domain. The worshipper does not see the source. Mystery strengthens the gift. A fringe theory claims ancient Mesopotamians possessed secret knowledge of immense underground water systems far beyond ordinary observation. Supporters imagine lost surveys, concealed wells, or inherited science from an unknown civilization. The simpler explanation is more convincing. People living beside wells, springs, marshes, and seepage understand that water travels beneath the ground. Careful observation can produce profound ideas without mysterious teachers. Their cosmology grows from experience. The earth gives water unexpectedly. Therefore, something vast must lie below. Modern geology confirms that groundwater does move through sediments beneath southern Mesopotamia, though not as one boundless sacred ocean. Layers of sand, silt, and clay store and redirect water in complex ways. The ancient image is not scientifically exact, it is emotionally exact. Life truly does depend upon water hidden within the ground. Research published through major scientific institutions has shown how changing river systems shaped settlement across the Mesopotamian plain. Human communities followed reliable channels, abandoned failing ones, and built canals to extend fertility. Water determined where memory could survive. A temple devoted to the deep therefore stood at the centre of both theology and geography. You step outside briefly and place your palm against the soil. The upper crust feels dry and warm. Several finger widths below, the clay grows cooler. That change alone could inspire wonder. The hidden world is close. It waits under courtyards, fields, and burial places. The dead enter the earth, while fresh water rises from it. Such proximity may create unease. The deep gives life, but it also receives what disappears. It nourishes roots while hiding foundations. Enki's realm is generous, yet never completely safe. Ancient stories often portray deep waters as powerful, unpredictable, and difficult to contain. Wisdom becomes necessary because abundance without boundaries can turn destructive. Too little water brings hunger. Too much dissolves walls, floods fields, and carries away homes. The temple expresses balance between these extremes. Its basin contains water within a measured edge. Its walls hold mud in ordered courses. Its rituals transform dangerous forces into controlled gifts. Containment becomes sacred. A small bowl may represent an ocean, provided the boundary remains unbroken. You return to the chamber as incense smoke curls above the water. The scent of resin mixes with damp clay and lamp oil. A ritual specialist lowers a reed into the basin, then touches the wet tip to a doorway. One mark blesses the threshold, another touches the platform. A final drop falls upon the worshipper's forehead. The actions move slowly, almost too softly to notice. Yet each one repeats the same idea. Hidden water enters visible order. Perhaps this is the central secret of Enki's house. The temple does not simply honour a god beneath the earth, it recreates his structure. Depth rests below, land rises above. Wisdom moves between them through channels, vessels, hands, and words. Human beings stand in the middle. They receive what they cannot create, then shape it carefully. The basin grows still again. Its surface holds the ceiling, the lamp, and your face within one dark reflection. Everything appears suspended above depth. Nothing touches the bottom. A wooden mallet taps against a clay tablet, while evening settles over the sanctuary. Each mark fixes one more fragment of order into the soft surface. The old compositions describe Enki travelling through the world and assigning duties to lands, rivers, cities, plants, animals, and human crafts. Nothing remains without a place. He appoints grain to the fields, he gives fish to the waterways, herds to the pasture, and skilled hands to the workshop. He establishes boundaries between activities that might otherwise collide. The world becomes organized through distribution. This idea appears clearly in a composition often called Enki and the World Order. Copies were written long after the earlier sanctuary at Eridu. Yet the poem preserves an ancient vision of civilization as arranged intelligence. The god does not create everything from emptiness. Instead, he takes a crowded world and gives each part a task. His wisdom lies in placement, sequence, and useful distinction. You can feel that logic inside the temple. Grain belongs in one vessel, oil belongs in another. Sacred tools remain separated from ordinary household objects. Certain rooms receive offerings, others store supplies. Particular doorways admit visitors, while restricted spaces remain closed. Every object has a place. The sanctuary mirrors the world Enki organizes. A ritual specialist carries a basket through the central hall. Inside lie reeds, wool, grain, fish, and small pieces of worked stone. Each item represents a different environment and human skill. Together, they form a miniature inventory of civilized life. The basket is placed near the platform. No item speaks alone. Reeds suggest marshes, boats, mats, roofs, and baskets. Wool recalls herds, spinning, weaving, clothing, and trade. Grain represents fields, canals, bread, beer, storage, taxation, and survival through lean seasons. Stone arrives from distant regions because the southern plain provides little of it. Its presence reveals exchange, travel, negotiation, and remembered roots. Enki's order joins these separate things. Civilization depends upon relationships between materials, people, and places. A temple cannot rise without clay. Water, reeds, food, labor, measurement, and agreement. Remove one element, and the structure weakens. The same principle governs the settlement. A farmer depends upon canal workers. A boat maker depends upon reed cutters and bitumen collectors. A potter depends upon fuel, clay, water, and people willing to exchange grain for vessels. Nobody remains truly independent. The divine system described in later texts gives sacred meaning to this dependence. Occupations are not random accidents. They are assignments within a larger design. Research at Yale University has examined how Mesopotamian literature presents civilization as a network of divinely authorized skills, kingship, craft, agriculture, herding, judgment, and ritual all appear as parts of an ordered whole. Such stories justify institutions by placing their origin beyond ordinary debate. A canal is not merely useful, it belongs to the structure of the world. A ritual leader can therefore describe cooperation as obedience to cosmic arrangement. Refusing communal work may seem like more than laziness. It may appear as resistance against divine order. You hear workers gathering near a damaged canal bank. One group brings baskets, another carries wooden tools. A supervisor assigns sections of the channel to different households. The task resembles the god's activity within the old composition. Names are matched with duties. The resemblance may be intentional. Human administration imitates divine administration. Leaders gain legitimacy by presenting their decisions as reflections of Enki's wisdom. This arrangement can protect communities from confusion. It can also protect leaders from criticism, which is a rather convenient benefit of sacred authority. Order always has two faces. It prevents chaos, but it also determines who gives instructions and who carries the mud. The sanctuary stands at the center of that tension. Offerings arrive from many households, then move through the hands of selected officials. Stored goods support ceremonies, workers, guests, and perhaps vulnerable families during shortage. Control over distribution brings influence. A person who knows what enters and leaves the storeroom understands the community's hidden balance. No written accounts survive from Eridu's earliest phases, but later temple economies used tablets to record grain, livestock, labour, and deliveries. The University of Chicago has studied thousands of such records from Mesopotamian sites. They reveal institutions deeply involved in production and allocation. Eridu's prehistoric sanctuary may not yet possess that full administrative machinery. Still, the architectural need for storage and controlled access suggests movement toward organised management. The blueprint begins resembling an institution. You enter a side room where baskets line the walls, some hold grain, others contain wool or dried reeds. Clay ceilings may secure valuable containers. A broken seal would reveal unauthorized opening. Even before extensive writing, a simple stamped surface can protect an agreement. The mark says that someone is responsible. Responsibility is one of Enki's quiet gifts. A world without assigned duties leaves every task uncertain. Everyone may assume someone else will repair the bank, guard the store, or prepare the offering. Soon, nobody acts. Assignment turns need into obligation. The ancient composition imagines the god moving from region to region, setting each domain in place. Rivers receive their courses, fields receive fertility, crafts receive patrons and purposes. The poem feels almost like an enormous administrative tour. Though its language remains ceremonial and grand, Enki behaves as planner, judge, engineer, and patient organizer. He is divine wisdom wearing practical sandals. A curious fringe theory claims the composition preserves the memory of an advanced lost administration that mapped the planet before known civilizations emerged. Supporters point toward its broad geographical vision and detailed division of resources. The theory lacks archaeological theoretical support. The poem reflects the concerns of complex Mesopotamian society, where people already understood trade, irrigation, regional difference, and specialized labor. Its achievement remains impressive without requiring forgotten global rulers. The true mystery lies closer to human experience. How did communities learn to coordinate so many activities without collapsing under mistrust, rivalry, and simple exhaustion? Religious order offered one answer. People could imagine their separate tasks as parts of a sacred system rather than burdens imposed by neighbours. A fisher served more than his household. A weaver served more than a private need. Each person participated in a pattern established by wisdom. Oxford University historians continue debating whether such literature describes actual social organisation or presents an idealised vision. Some scholars read the compositions as reflections of temple administration. Others see them as poetic claims that disguise conflict, inequality, and local variation. The distinction matters. A society may praise perfect order precisely because daily life remains disorderly. Canals fail, officials misuse stores, families avoid labour. Powerful households demand larger shares. The poem does not prove harmony. It reveals the longing for harmony. You sense that longing within the sanctuary as offerings are arranged in careful rows. Every vessel stands upright. Every basket occupies its assigned place. Every participant waits for a signal, for one brief ceremony. Confusion appears defeated. The room becomes a model of how the world should function. Outside, animals wander through pathways, children argue, and a merchant disputes the value of a stone blade. Ordinary life continues resisting neat arrangement. Inside, the temple insists that order remains possible. Perhaps that is why Enki's wisdom feels so powerful. It does not erase complexity, it gives complexity a structure. The god's blueprint extends beyond walls and platforms. It includes occupations, resources, duties, relationships, and boundaries. Humanity receives no simple freedom within this vision. People are placed inside a system. They cultivate, build, weave, fish, judge, carry, measure, and offer. Their work maintains the world's balance, Perhaps they were created for service. Perhaps service was understood as the price of order. The question remains unsettled, even within the old stories. You listen as the final tablet mark enters damp clay. The scribe lifts his stylus and studies the completed surface. Nothing moves upon the tablet, yet rivers, fields, cities, and human duties now exist together within its silent signs. Enki's temple has become more than a sacred house. It is the center of an organized world. The ceiling disappears into darkness while a single lamp burns beside the central platform. Its flame reveals walls arranged with almost mathematical calm. You stand within a building, yet the room feels larger than its physical limits. The floor seems to represent land, while hidden water waits symbolically beneath it. Above, roof beams divide the unseen sky. Around you, doorways mark passages between different conditions of existence. One threshold separates daylight from sacred shadow, another divides public movement from restricted presence. The temple becomes a small universe. Ancient Mesopotamians did not always separate architecture, religion, government, and nature into independent subjects. A sacred building could contain all these meanings at once. Its design could describe creation without using pictures. The stable platform rises above the floor like ordered earth emerging from water. The basin recalls the freshwater deep. Smoke travels upward toward the divine sky. Offerings move between these levels. Grain comes from cultivated land. Fish come from hidden water. Incense becomes smoke, rising beyond human reach. Every ritual object follows a direction. The temple therefore operates like a model of cosmic circulation. Materials enters from the surrounding world, receives sacred treatment, then return as food, smoke, blessing, or buried remains. Nothing remains entirely still. Even the divine presence participates in exchange. People bring nourishment, praise, and labor. In return, they seek fertility, protection, knowledge, and continued balance. The building gives this invisible exchange a measurable structure. Researchers at the University of Oxford have studied how Mesopotamian temples expressed relationships between heaven, earth, water, and political authority. Sacred architecture often presented divine order through elevation, orientation, and controlled access. The structure did not merely contain worship, it made a claim about reality. A visitor approaching the central chamber entered a carefully organized world. Disorder remained outside among flooded paths. Broken tools, quarrels, sickness, and uncertain harvests. Inside, every object occupied an assigned place. The lamp rested upon its stand. The offering bowl faced the platform. The ritual specialist followed a known path. For several quiet moments, the world behaved correctly. You hear water poured into a basin near the wall. Its sound represents depth entering the human realm. A handful of grain is placed upon a raised surface. It represents cultivated earth. Shaped through labor and intelligence, incense touches a coal. Fragrant smoke rises, carrying human intention toward the unseen heights. The three movements connect water, land, and sky inside one room. This sequence may have seemed like maintenance. Creation was not necessarily imagined as an event completed forever. Order required renewal through ritual, justice, agriculture, and careful observance. A neglected temple could threaten more than a building. It might suggest that the bonds holding creation together were weakening. Walls needed plaster, canals needed clearing, offerings needed presentation, agreements needed witnesses. Cosmic stability depended upon repeated human action. This belief gave ordinary work profound importance. Carrying water toward the sanctuary could become participation in creation. Repairing a wall could resemble repairing the boundary between order and chaos. The temple functioned as both symbol and instrument. A symbol represents an idea, an instrument performs an action. Eridu's sanctuary may have done both. Its architecture described an ordered cosmos, while ceremonies enacted the relationships sustaining that order. The building became a device for turning human labour into sacred continuity, not a machine of metal, a machine of movement, memory, and belief. Stanford University scholars examining ritual systems have noted that repeated actions can create powerful shared realities. Participants experience the same sequence until it feels woven into the natural structure of life. At Eridu, generations may have entered along similar routes and placed offerings near similar platforms. The repetition gave the plan authority. People did not need a written explanation. Their bodies already knew where Earth ended, where sacred depth began, and where divine presence waited. Architecture carried theology through habit. You move around the chamber and notice how every boundary produces meaning. The wall separates cultivated interior from uncontrolled exterior. The doorway allows passage, but only at one chosen point. The platform lifts selected objects above ordinary contact. The basin contains water that would otherwise spread across the floor. Creation appears here as the art of separation. Water is given an edge. Space is given a purpose. Movement is given a route. The temple teaches that order begins when boundaries hold. Mesopotamian creation traditions often describe the world through divisions and assignments. Waters separate. Divine powers receive domains, and human beings receive duties. The sanctuary translates that logic into clay. Each room becomes a domain. A storage chamber belongs to provisions. A preparation space belongs to cleansing and arrangement. The central hall belongs to encounter. The plan resembles a diagram of organized existence. A curious fringe belief proposes that the temple operated as a device for concentrating hidden energies rising from the underground water. Supporters imagine that walls, platforms, and orientation directed natural forces toward the sacred chamber. No reliable archaeological evidence confirms such energy technology, yet the theory grows from a genuine feature of the site. The building does concentrate attention, movement, sound, scent, light, and social authority. Its power is real, though human rather than mechanical. A whisper spoken near the platform carries differently from conversation out Tien. Incense fills enclosed air and alters breathing. Restricted access increases expectation. Carefully arranged light transforms ordinary objects into sacred presences. The temple changes perception through architecture. This does not require secret technology. It requires skilled observation of human senses. Builders knew that darkness could make one flame seem immense. Ritual specialists knew that silence could make one word unforgettable. The sanctuary magnified experience. A scholarly debate remains open concerning whether ancient builders consciously designed temples as complete cosmic models. Some historians see deliberate symbolic planning in their orientation and internal hierarchy. Others caution that practical construction and inherited custom may explain many features without requiring a unified theological blueprint. The distinction is difficult to prove. A builder may follow traditional measurements without knowing every symbolic meaning attached to them. A ritual leader may interpret practical features through sacred stories. Meaning can accumulate slowly. A raised platform begins as protection from dampness. Generations later, it becomes the image of ordered land above primeval water. A roof opening begins as ventilation. Later, smoke passing through it becomes a path toward heaven. Utility and symbolism grow together. The temple does not need one original designer who understands everything. Its cosmic character can emerge through centuries of interpretation. Yale University research into ancient religion has often emphasized that sacred traditions remain flexible while claiming permanence. Communities reshape inherited forms without admitting that anything essential has changed. This allows buildings to gather meaning far older than any living memory. Eridu Sanctuary may have begun as a communal ritual house. Over time, its repeated plan became connected with water, wisdom, creation, kingship, and divine order. Each generation added interpretation. The walls stayed silent. Silence made them generous. People could place new stories inside familiar rooms. A platform could support changing images while preserving its sacred direction. A doorway could guide new ceremonies along an ancient route. The cosmic machine therefore remained adaptable. It needed no gears because human beings supplied motion. They entered, turned, carried, poured, burned, spoke, waited, and withdrew. Their bodies activated the plan. Without them, the sanctuary was only clay. With them, it became a working model of existence. You stand near the basin as the lamp burns lower. Water reflects the ceiling beams, making them appear beneath the surface. Sky seems to exist below your feet. The image feels unsettling because the temple has folded the world inward. Depth contains height, while earth rests between them. For one quiet moment, creation appears enclosed within a bowl. The flame trembles. The walls remain still. Somewhere in the darkness, the temple continues its ancient work. Wax smoke hangs beneath the roof while a ritual specialist studies a measuring cord stretched across the floor. The cord is old, darkened by hands, and marked with knots placed at familiar intervals. Nothing about it looks royal, yet one misplaced knot could alter a doorway, shift a platform, or disturb the route of ceremony. The temple pattern survives because someone remembers where every measure belongs. That responsibility falls to guardians of sacred knowledge. They are not simply priests in the later sense, dressed permanently in authority and separated from ordinary work. Some may oversee offerings, while others maintain vessels and calendars, storerooms, purification rules, or building traditions. Their knowledge is divided. One person remembers the proper sequence of words, another knows which clay mixture protects a wall from dampness. Someone else guards the list of households expected to contribute grain, fish, wool, or labour together. They preserve the sanctuary. The oldest instructions may never have been written. They pass through observation, repetition, correction, and carefully controlled participation. A novice begins with simple duties. She sweeps a side room, cleans a vessel, watches the preparation of water, and learns where not to stand. Her teachers rarely explain everything at once. Sacred knowledge often arrives in fragments. A gesture is demonstrated before its meaning is revealed. A phrase is repeated until the breath learns its rhythm. A doorway remains forbidden until the student understands the obligations beyond it. Training becomes patience. You watch an older specialist place 3 bowls upon a reed mat. Each bowl faces the same direction, though their decoration differs. The novice adjusts one slightly. The elder moves it back without speaking. Such correction teaches more than arrangement. It teaches that inherited form matters, even when the reason remains hidden. The sanctuary depends upon countless details that appear small from outside. A lamp must be filled before darkness. Water must remain clean. Offerings must arrive in suitable condition. A damaged vessel cannot simply be replaced without thought. Its shape, history, and location may matter to the rite. The guardians learn to notice what others overlook. Researchers at Yale overlook. Researchers at Yale University have shown that Mesopotamian temple service eventually involved specialized personnel with carefully defined duties. Singers, cooks, cleaners, administrators, diviners, and ritual experts could all belong to a sacred household. Eridu's earliest phases provide no complete list. Still, the increasing complexity of the sanctuary suggests that knowledge was becoming organized around particular roles. A larger ritual system requires people who remember how its parts fit together. Memory becomes an institution. You enter a small chamber where cords, baskets, sealed jars, and wooden tools rest upon shelves. None of these objects appears divine. Their arrangement gives them authority. A measuring rod may determine the width of a platform. A seal may protect supplies reserved for ceremony. A basket may carry offerings along a route repeated for generations. The tools become sacred through use. An experienced builder consults the ritual guardian before marking a new foundation. The guardian walks the proposed line slowly, counting paces beneath her breath. She touches the ground at several points. Perhaps she recalls an older wall hidden beneath the soil. Perhaps she follows a traditional alignment preserved through oral instruction. The builder waits. This pause reveals a partnership between technical skill and ceremonial legitimacy. The wall must stand securely, but it must also belong to the inherited pattern. A strong wall built incorrectly could still be unacceptable. Oxford University historians have argued that ancient sacred authority often rested upon claims of continuity. A ritual specialist did not present each decision as a personal invention. She spoke as the keeper of an older order. This claim protected the tradition from casual change. It also protected the guardian's position, since authority grows stronger when it appears borrowed from the distant past. The arrangement is useful. It can preserve hard-won knowledge across generations. It can also hide ordinary preference behind divine necessity. Scholars continue debating whether early temple roles were inherited within families or shared among wider community groups. Some evidence from later periods suggests that offices could remain linked to particular households. Other traditions indicate rotation, appointment, training, or royal control. The earliest pattern at Eridu remains uncertain. Perhaps one respected lineage guarded the central rites. Perhaps several families divided responsibilities according to season, craft, or contribution. A fisher's household might prepare aquatic offerings. A farming family might oversee grain. A potter might produce vessels reserved for sacred use. Such arrangements would preserve specialist knowledge without creating one permanent priestly class. The temple could gather expertise from across the settlement. You hear a low chant from the central hall. The words are repeated slowly, with pauses that allow the next line to arrive from memory. No written page guides the singer. The composition survives inside breath and rhythm. Music protects language from forgetting. Repeated melody gives shape to long sequences that ordinary speech might lose. The guardian learns not only words, but timing. A phrase spoken too early may interrupt an offering. A drum beat placed incorrectly may signal movement before preparation is complete. Ritual depends upon coordination. One person pours water while another raises a vessel. A singer begins as souk-rayeur. A door closes when the final participant enters. The ceremony resembles a woven mat. Each action crosses another, and weakness in one strand can loosen the pattern. This is why training remains strict. A curious fringe belief claims that temple guardians memorize secret numbers believed to control weather, fertility, and human fate. Later Mesopotamian traditions certainly valued numerical symbolism and carefully ordered ritual counts. No evidence proves that Eridu's earliest specialists possessed a hidden mathematical code, yet counting mattered. Offerings came in measured amounts. Repeated gestures followed established numbers. Building lines required dependable units. The border between practical counting and sacred number may have remained very thin. A guardian could see measurement as both useful and holy. Correct proportion maintained walls, while correct repetition maintained ritual order. The same discipline served both worlds. You watch the measuring cord being rolled into a tight bundle. It is placed inside a covered container rather than left among ordinary tools. The gesture suggests respect. Perhaps the cord represents more than length. It may preserve the remembered dimensions of the sanctuary, allowing rebuilding without a surviving drawing. A new generation can recover the plan from knots and practice. This possibility remains difficult to prove, but ancient builders commonly used cords, rods, and sighting methods, knowledge could survive securely through tools combined with trained memory. The blueprint may have existed in several forms at once. Part rested beneath the ground in older foundations, part lived within repeated movement, part remained in the hands of those trusted to measure. That trust carried social weight. A guardian who controlled access to sacred rooms also controlled access to sacred information. She knew when ceremonies occurred and which households fulfilled their duties. She heard disputes brought near the sanctuary. Knowledge gathered around her quietly, yet the role also demanded service, lamps needed filling, vessels needed washing, and frightened visitors needed guidance. Sacred authority involved many unglamorous tasks. A leaking roof remains unimpressed by theology. The guardian must therefore understand both mystery and maintenance. She protects the hidden pattern by caring for visible details. Dust is removed, cracks are noticed, supplies are counted. The sacred survives through housekeeping. Night deepens beyond the doorway. The final lamp is trimmed, and the measuring cord disappears into shadow. No inscription praises the hands that preserve it. Still, the temple stands because memory has found guardians. The ground trembles softly beneath wooden sledges as teams drag baskets. Beams and bricks toward the sacred mound. The sanctuary no longer rises like an enlarged household room. It dominates the settlement through height, labour, and controlled distance. The scale changes. Walls grow thicker, facades become more complex, and the building claims a wider portion of the horizon. What once gathered several families can now receive offerings from many communities across the surrounding plain. Every enlargement carries a message. The temple possesses enough authority to summon workers, collect materials, feed labourers, and direct construction across several seasons. Such power cannot remain purely spiritual. It enters politics, agriculture, trade, and household obligation. You stand beside a ramp where labourers climb beneath heavy loads. Their sandals press deep tracks into damp clay, while supervisors watch the movement of each team. Water carriers pass constantly between mixing pits and brickfields. Bakers prepare bread near temporary shelters. Brewers fill large jars for workers facing long hours beneath that. Construction becomes an economy. A larger sanctuary requires enormous quantities of mud brick, reeds, timber, plaster, rope, food, and skilled attention. These resources must arrive at the correct moment. Too few bricks delay the walls. Missing roof beams leave finished rooms exposed to weather. Insufficient grain sends workers home before the platform reaches its intended height. Planning becomes essential. Research associated with the University of Chicago has shown that early Mesopotamian public buildings often grew alongside more organized systems of labor and redistribution. Temples could gather goods, store surplus, and support specialists whose work served wider communities. Eridu offers a powerful architectural expression of that development. The expanding sanctuary reveals a community capable of concentrating resources beyond immediate household survival. People contribute because the building represents divine favor, communal identity, and increasingly visible authority. Those motives overlap. A farmer may bring grain because he honors Enki. He may also fear social judgment if his contribution appears too small. A powerful household may donate several labor teams as an act of devotion. The public generosity conveniently strengthens its reputation. Sacred giving rarely escapes human ambition. You hear names announced beside a storage chamber as baskets arrive from distant fields. One family contributes barley, another brings wool, fishers deliver preserved catches, reed cutters provide bundled material for roofing and screens. Each contribution becomes part of the temple's growing body. The institution receives, records through memory or simple marks, then redistributes goods to builders, ritual specialists, visitors, and dependent workers. This circulation gives the sanctuary economic weight. A household facing shortage may seek temple assistance. A traveller may receive food near its outer court, A skilled craft worker may depend upon supplies issued from sacred stores. The temple becomes a place where abundance is collected and scarcity is negotiated. That position creates loyalty. It also creates dependence. A person who controls access to grain controls more than food. He influences labor, alliances, and survival during difficult seasons. The sacred storehouse therefore casts a political shadow. Stanford University scholars studying institutional development have argued that public projects can strengthen cooperation while also producing durable inequalities. Shared labor builds community, yet leadership over shared labor can become permanent. The monument makes authority visible. A respected elder may once have persuaded neighbors through personal trust. A temple official now speaks from a building raised above ordinary houses. The walls extend his voice before he says anything. Architecture changes social distance. You approach the enlarged facade as sunlight moves across alternating projections and recesses. The pattern produces deep shadows that make the wall appear more massive. A simple surface would protect the interior just as well. Decorative complexity serves another purpose. It announces care, skill, and surplus. Only a community with available labor can spend time shaping walls beyond strict necessity. Ornament therefore becomes evidence of organized wealth. The building says that its god is powerful. It also says that those serving the god command resources. A curious fringe belief claims the projecting walls were designed as symbolic waves surrounding Enki's earthly dwelling. Some enthusiasts see the facade as a frozen image of water moving around sacred land. No ancient explanation confirms this interpretation. The recesses may have strengthened walls, reduced cracking, improved appearance, or continued an established decorative style. Those several purposes may have operated together. Still, a water association would have felt natural within Eridu. Visitors arriving by canal might see the patterned exterior changing with the light, almost shimmering above the plain. The monument would seem alive. You pass through a larger entrance where attendants manage arriving groups. People no longer wander casually toward the central chamber. Offerings are inspected, arranged, and directed into separate spaces. Some visitors remain outside restricted zones. Growth requires control. A small shrine can depend upon familiarity because everyone knows everyone else. A larger institution receives strangers, distant families, merchants, labourers, and officials. Rules must replace personal recognition. Doorways become checkpoints. Courtyards organise crowds. Storerooms separate valuable goods from ceremonial spaces. The temple plan begins managing society through movement. Oxford University historians have noted that monumentality is not defined only by size. A building becomes monumental when it changes how people experience authority, memory, and collective identity. Eridu's expanding sanctuary accomplishes this through elevation and repetition. Each generation sees the sacred structure standing above older foundations. Its height suggests age, endurance, and closeness to divine order. A leader associated with such a place inherits its accumulated dignity. He may be temporary, the monument is not. This imbalance allows institutions to outlive individual reputations. Officials come and go, while the temple continues collecting offerings and directing ceremonies. Its authority appears timeless, even when its administrators change. A scholarly debate remains open concerning who controlled this expanding system. Some researchers see evidence for an increasingly specialized priesthood managing land, labor, and stored goods. Others emphasize powerful households, communal councils, or temporary leaders who coordinated major projects without creating a permanent ruling class. The architecture proves organization. It does not reveal every decision made behind its walls. A large building can emerge from willing cooperation, compelled labor, or a shifting mixture of both. The same worker may feel pride, duty, exhaustion, and resentment within a single afternoon. Human motives refuse simple categories. You watch a labourer pause beside the rising platform. His shoulders are coated with dust, and his hands tremble from carrying bricks. He looks upward. Perhaps he feels satisfaction because his work strengthens the house of Enki. Perhaps he calculates how much grain remains owed to his family. Perhaps both thoughts share the same silence. The monument absorbs every contribution without preserving the giver's name. Its walls display collective achievement while concealing individual strain. That concealment gives grandeur its unsettling edge. A finished temple appears calm because the noise of construction has ended. The shouting, bargaining, injuries, missed meals, and failed walls disappear beneath plaster. Order hides the cost of becoming visible. Yet the community also gains something real. The enlarged sanctuary can host greater ceremonies, protect more supplies, attract distant visitors, and strengthen Eridu's importance within regional networks. Merchants may trust a settlement guarded by respected divine authority. Travellers may choose routes passing near its canals. Ritual fame draws exchange. Economic activity strengthens the temple, and the strengthened temple attracts further activity. Devotion and prosperity begin reinforcing each other. The sacred centre becomes a political centre without declaring itself a palace. No crown is necessary. A platform, a storehouse, and a labour force can produce power quietly. Dusk falls across the finished facade while workers descend from the final ramp. The plastered walls hold a pale glow above the settlement. Families gather below, looking toward the building they helped raise. It belongs to everyone. It also belongs to those holding its keys. A distant drum sounds across the plain while dawn settles over the sacred city. The temple stands above clustered houses, canals, workshops, and fields reaching toward the horizon. Yet the oldest traditions remember something greater than buildings. They remember authority descending from heaven. In the Sumerian King List, Eridu appears as the first city to receive kingship. The text begins its sequence of rulers here, placing the city at the opening of organized political time. The claim is not modest. It does not say Eridu became influential through trade, warfare, or careful administration. It says legitimate rule entered the human world at this place. Kingship arrives almost like rain. You imagine the announcement moving through the settlement. A chosen ruler approaches the sanctuary while elders, workers, and ritual specialists gather along the route. No surviving account describes the ceremony. Still, later Mesopotamian tradition presents kingship as a divine institution rather than a private possession. A ruler governs because higher powers temporarily entrust him with order. That trust can be withdrawn. The temple therefore stands above the ruler in symbolic importance. A king may protect the city, judge disputes, organize labour, and command soldiers. Yet his authority requires divine recognition. At Eridu, Enki becomes the keeper of wisdom behind political order. His sanctuary offers a setting where earthly leadership receives sacred meaning. A ruler entering the temple does not create legitimacy alone, he receives it. The distinction matters because human power is unstable. Strong leaders die, families divide, and ambitious rivals gather supporters. Divine kingship promises continuity beyond one person. Oxford University historians studying the Sumerian King List emphasize that the composition is not a simple record of events. It combines memory, political theology, legend, and selected historical rulers. Its purpose is orderly succession. Kingship moves from city to city, as though one sacred office travels through Mesopotamia. Eridu receives it first, then loses it when divine favour shifts elsewhere. This pattern transforms political change into cosmic decision. A defeated city does not merely lose a war, it loses its place within a sacred sequence. A victorious ruler does not merely seize power, he becomes the temporary bearer of an institution older than every dynasty. The story protects kingship even when kings fail. You enter an imagined audience space near the temple, where petitioners wait beneath woven shades. Farmers bring disputes over water boundaries. Merchants argue about damaged goods. A widow asks protection from relatives attempting to seize her household property. A canal supervisor requests more labour before the banks collapse. The ruler cannot solve every problem personally. Officials, elders, judges, scribes, and temple representatives help turn decisions into action. Political order therefore depends upon a network rather than one commanding voice. Still, the king becomes its visible centre. His presence gathers scattered authority into one body. His judgments claim to restore balance rather than express personal preference. That claim echoes Enki's role as organizer. The ruler divides labour, protects boundaries, and assigns responsibilities. In theory, he imitates divine wisdom upon earth. In practice, human wisdom often arrives late and leaves early. A council may resist him. Powerful families may withhold support. Temple officials may guard privileges that no ruler can easily challenge. The sacred city contains cooperation, rivalry, and careful negotiation. Research from the University of Pennsylvania has shown that early Mesopotamian leadership developed through several overlapping institutions. Temples, households, councils, and military authority all shaped emerging urban government. No single model explains every city. Eridu's later memory as the first seat of kingship may therefore simplify a much slower transformation. Leadership probably grew through generations of communal management, ritual prestige, and control over resources. Nobody woke one morning inside a fully formed monarchy. Authority accumulated gradually. One person coordinated canal work, another settled disputes, another supervised offerings or represented the settlement during negotiations. Over time, certain offices became more permanent. Families may have passed responsibilities to their descendants. Ritual approval strengthened political claims, while successful leadership attracted further loyalty. The king emerged from layers of service and advantage. Later tradition erased much of that uncertainty, presented kingship as a finished gift descending from the divine world. That image is cleaner. It is also more useful to rulers. A king whose office comes from heaven need not discuss every human bargain supporting his throne. Sacred origin hides political construction beneath ceremonial language. The temple provides the perfect stage. You hear bronze ornaments sounding softly as a ruler approaches the sanctuary entrance. His clothing is finer than ordinary garments, though dust still clings to his sandals. Attendants carry gifts, grain, oil, fish woven in cloth, and precious stone enter ahead of him. The offering demonstrates humility before Enki, but it also displays wealth before the gathered people. Devotion and performance move together. A ritual specialist receives the ruler at the threshold. For a brief moment, he must wait like everyone else. The pause reminds him that sacred space has its own hierarchy. He may command labour outside, yet he cannot approach the divine centre without permission. The temple disciplines kingship through ritual. That discipline may remain symbolic, but symbols influence behaviour. A ruler who ignores sacred custom risks losing support from officials, households, and neighbouring cities. Divine displeasure becomes political danger. Priests do not need armies when public belief protects their authority. Still, kings eventually build armies. The Sumerian King List gives some early rulers' reigns lasting tens of thousands of years. These impossible numbers clearly belong to mythic time rather than ordinary chronology. One curious tradition gives Eridu only 2 kings before the flood. Their names are Alulim and Alalga, and their reigns stretch across vast ages beyond human experience. A fringe interpretation claims these figures preserve memories of immortal rulers from a forgotten civilization. Some enthusiasts imagine beings who governed humanity when lifespans followed different laws. No historical evidence supports that conclusion. The enormous rains function better as symbols of sacred antiquity. They place the first kings closer to creation. When time itself appears deeper and less familiar, length becomes dignity. The farther the ruler stands from the present, the larger his reign becomes. Myth measures importance through impossible duration. A continuing scholarly debate concerns why Eridu receives first place within this political tradition. Some researchers point toward its genuine antiquity and ancient religious prestige. Others suggest later scribes deliberately elevated Eridu because of Enki's importance within Mesopotamian theology. The choice may combine memory and ideology. Eridu was genuinely old. Its sacred sequence reached into periods beyond writing, giving it unusual authority among later cities. A tradition seeking the beginning of kingship naturally looked toward the oldest remembered sacred centre. Yet age alone does not create first place. Scribes selected, arranged, and interpreted the past according to concerns of their own time. They turned scattered local traditions into one sequence of legitimate rule. The resulting list feels historical because it names cities and rulers. It feels mythical because heaven decides when authority moves. You sense both qualities while standing near the temple platform. The city is real. Its mud bricks, canals, offerings, and labourers belong to archaeology. The descent of kingship belongs to sacred memory. Neither world fully cancels the other. Political institutions often begin through practical necessity, then acquire stories explaining why they must exist. Those stories become powerful because people live within them. A ruler may know his throne depends upon alliances. He may still believe Enki approves his rule. The people may understand that taxes support the palace. They may also believe those payments maintain cosmic order. Human beings rarely choose between practical and sacred explanations. They carry both. Night gathers around Eridu while lamps appear along the temple approach. The ruler leaves through the outer doorway. Accompanied by attendants and quiet murmurs, his authority seems immense. Yet the sanctuary remains behind him, older than his house and deeper than his name. Kingship may descend from heaven. It still requires a place to land. Rain strikes the roof in slow and heavy drops while darkness gathers above the southern plain. The sound travels through reed beams and plaster, growing louder as water collects beyond the walls. Families wake and listen. A storm is never merely weather in this landscape. It can refill channels, soften fields, and rescue thirsty animals. It can also erase boundaries, collapse houses, and carry stored grain into black water. The same gift can become destruction. Ancient Mesopotamian traditions remember a catastrophic flood that ended an earlier age of kings and cities. Eridu stands near the beginning of that story, where human order appears fragile beneath divine judgment. The Sumerian King List places the flood after the first rulers. Kingship then descends again, beginning a renewed sequence in another city. Time is divided by water. The flood does not simply damage buildings, it closes one world and separates legendary rulers from the more recognizable landscape of human history. You feel the rain increasing. Water runs from the roof edges, carving small channels through courtyard dust. Workers hurry to protect baskets, jars, and fuel. Animals pull against their ropes. A family carries sleeping children toward the higher ground. Another household raises grain sacks onto shelves, hoping the walls remain dry. Nobody knows how far the water will rise. Flooding across southern Mesopotamia could come from several causes. Rivers changed course, banks failed, canals overflowed, and storms pushed water across low ground. The plain offered little natural elevation. A modest rise could decide which house remained standing and which dissolved into mud. The temple mound therefore provided more than sacred height. It offered physical refuge. People climbed toward the sanctuary carrying food, blankets, lamps, and frightened children. The upper platforms stood above surrounding houses, though no elevation guaranteed complete safety. Water gathered below. Harvard University researchers studying ancient river systems have emphasized that Mesopotamian waterways shifted repeatedly across the plain. Settlements prospered beside active channels, then struggled when rivers moved or floods deposited heavy layers of silt. Such events could transform a familiar landscape within days. A field became a lake, a canal disappeared beneath sediment, a village route ended against newly formed water. The survivors rebuilt, but memory preserved the shock. Archaeologists at several Mesopotamian sites have discovered layers of water deposited sediment between periods of occupation. Some early excavators believed these deposits might confirm one universal flood. Later study revealed a more complicated picture. The flood layers did not always belong to the same date. They appeared at different depths, covered limited areas, and reflected separate local disasters. The evidence supports repeated severe flooding. It does not prove that one flood covered the entire Earth. That distinction matters because ancient stories often transform regional catastrophe into cosmic history. For a community whose known world followed rivers and canals, a vast local flood could feel universal. Every familiar landmark disappeared. The horizon offered only water, broken roofs, floating reeds, and distant trees. No untouched land remained within sight. The whole world had ended. You stand upon the temple height, while rain blurs the settlement below. Lamps burn inside crowded rooms. A ritual specialist pours fresh water into a basin, while floodwater surrounds the mound. The contrast feels almost unbearable. Contained water remains sacred. Uncontained water becomes chaos. The temple teaches that life depends upon boundaries, and basins hold water. Canals guide it, banks restrain it, and walls protect people from it. When those boundaries fail, creation seems to reverse. Fields return to marsh, houses return to clay, roads vanish beneath the same waters from which ordered land once emerged. The flood becomes unmaking. Ancient compositions describe a chosen survivor receiving warning before disaster. He builds a great vessel, gathers living creatures, and carries the seed of human life through destruction. The figure is known in different traditions by different names. His role remains constant. He listens when others do not. A curious fringe theory claims the story preserves memory of a sudden rise in sea level that drowned an ancient civilization near the Persian Gulf. Supporters imagine settlements now buried beneath coastal sediments. The Gulf region did experience major environmental changes over long periods, yet no secure evidence connects one drowned civilization directly with the Mesopotamian flood accounts. Geological change usually unfolds more slowly than legend suggests. Still, coastlines can retreat, storms can overwhelm settlements, and memories can travel far through oral tradition. The possibility remains haunting. Perhaps communities carried stories inland from places swallowed by water. Perhaps separate disasters merged over generations into one immense ancestral catastrophe. Memory rarely preserves events like a measured record. It gathers emotion. One flood contributes terror. Another contributes a heroic survivor. A third provides the image of animals crowded into a vessel. Priests and storytellers weave these fragments into a single sacred account. Oxford University scholars have long debated whether Mesopotamian flood traditions preserve historical memories, theological lessons, or literary relationships between different texts. Some emphasize environmental experience. Others focus upon the stories as reflections on divine power, human noise, mortality, and the uncertain value of civilization. Both interpretations can exist together. A real disaster can become a moral story. A moral story can preserve details inherited from real disasters. The boundary between history and myth remains porous. You hear the temple doors close against the storm. People inside speak quietly, sharing food while water rises around the mound. Someone tells an old story about a boat larger than any house. Someone else whispers that the god of wisdom once warned a faithful servant through a wall of reeds. The children listen. Fear makes memory sheer. Enki often appears within flood traditions as the divine intelligence that preserves human life. He does not openly challenge the council of gods. Instead, he finds an indirect path. He speaks through a boundary, offering warning without formally breaking the command of silence. This detail fits his character perfectly. Wisdom does not always defeat danger through strength. Sometimes it survives by finding one narrow opening inside a closed decision. The Temple of Enki therefore becomes more than a refuge from water. It becomes the place where knowledge resists destruction. A ruler may fail, a wall may collapse, an entire settlement may disappear beneath silt. Yet one warning, one plan, or one remembered pattern allows life to continue. The blueprint survives catastrophe because someone carries it, perhaps not upon a tablet, perhaps within memory, measurement, ritual, and habit. A survivor knows how to shape bricks, dig channels, prepare grain, weave reeds, and rebuild sacred space. Civilization returns through remembered skills. Stanford University researchers studying disaster recovery have shown that communities survive not only through resources, but through shared knowledge and trusted relationships. Ancient people understood this without modern terminology. A boat alone cannot rebuild a city. Survival requires farmers, builders, fishers, healers, elders, children, stories, and agreements. The flood myth preserves a complete social seed. When the waters retreat, that seed enters mud. You watch dawn emerge through thinning rain. The settlement below lies damaged. Walls have collapsed into rounded heaps. Dead reeds cover pathways. Clay vessels rest where water abandoned them. Silence replaces ordinary morning sounds. Then movement begins. A door opens. Someone tests the ground with a pole. Families descend cautiously from the mound. They search for tools, animals, grain, and relatives. The disaster has ended, but recovery has only begun. Fresh silt covers familiar boundaries. Old claims become difficult to prove because markers have vanished. The community must decide who receives which field, who repairs which canal, and where houses should stand. Flooding destroys order. Rebuilding creates a new one. This may explain why kingship descends again within the ancient list. Political authority returns because catastrophe demands renewed organization. The world must be measured once more. Eridu's sacred blueprint belongs to that act. Walls rise where mud has erased memory. Platforms restore direction. Doorways restore controlled movement. The temple declares that order can return. Yet the flood remains underneath every promise of permanence. People remember how quickly water crossed fields, entered houses, and turned strong walls into formless earth. No monument fully escapes that knowledge. The sky clears above the mound. Pools reflect a pale morning sun, while damaged reeds bend beneath their own weight. The temple still stands, for now. A measuring cord tightens between two wooden stakes while builders study a rectangle marked upon bare ground. The settlement is distant from Eridu, yet the planned sanctuary feels strangely familiar. A central hall occupies the heart of the design. Smaller rooms gather along its sides. A raised sacred place defines one end, while entrances guide visitors through an indirect approach. The pattern has travelled. Across Mesopotamia, communities construct sacred buildings with features resembling those developed at Eridu. The details change according to local needs, materials, and traditions. Still, the underlying grammar remains recognizable. Central spaces command attention. Side chambers support preparation and storage. Projecting walls create alternating bands of sunlight and shadow. Movement toward the sacred focus becomes controlled. This architectural family appears across settlements separated by waterways, deserts, fields, and generations. No single surviving document explains how the design spreads. The walls themselves provide the evidence. You walk beside merchants travelling along a canal route. Their boats carry grain, wool, pottery, timber, stone, and stories about distant cities. Builders also travel. A skilled craft worker may spend several seasons serving one settlement, then accept work elsewhere. He brings tools, proportions, habits, and solutions remembered from other construction sites. Knowledge moves inside people. A doorway seen in one temple becomes a possibility within another. A successful wall treatment becomes useful far beyond its original mound. A ritual leader visiting a respected sanctuary may return home with ideas about procession, light, or sacred separation. Imitation becomes devotion. The copied feature does not need to appear identical. Local builders adapt it to available space, labour, and religious expectation. The result resembles a melody performed with different instruments. Research associated with the University of Chicago has identified broad similarities among prehistoric and historic Mesopotamian sacred buildings. Tripartite plans, central halls, buttressed facades, and raised ritual areas recur across wide regions. These patterns do not prove that every temple copies Eridu directly. They reveal a shared architectural language. Eridu holds special importance because its long sequence preserves very ancient stages of that language. Its foundations show how simple arrangements develop into more elaborate sacred institutions. The design appears capable of growth without losing identity. A central hall can lengthen, side rooms can multiply, platforms can rise higher, while entrance routes become increasingly formal. The blueprint survives expansion. You arrive at a settlement where workers prepare a new temple foundation. The chief builder holds a rod against the ground while assistants mark corners with pegs. Nobody mentions Eridu. They may never have visited it, yet their teachers learned from builders whose own teachers inherited practices moving through regional networks. Architectural memory can travel farther than personal experience. The chain remains invisible. A technique passes from parent to child, master to apprentice, visitor to host, and rival to rival. Competition can spread design as effectively as admiration. A neighbouring city raises a larger sanctuary. Your own community responds by enlarging its sacred house, adding a more impressive facade and a higher platform. Religious devotion acquires a competitive edge. The god deserves magnificence. Naturally, the fact that another city must notice is merely an additional blessing. Monumental architecture communicates across distance. Travellers describe the height of walls, the width of courtyards, and the richness of offerings. These reports influence expectations elsewhere. A temple becomes famous through speech long before anyone draws its plan. Oxford University historians have studied how ancient sacred buildings created regional identities through repeated forms. Familiar layouts allowed visitors to recognize ritual authority even within an unfamiliar city. The architecture offered reassurance. A traveller crossing a threshold understood that certain movements, silences, and restrictions applied. Local customs differed, but the building communicated an inherited order. Shared form made distant communities feel connected. It also allowed powerful institutions to claim ancient legitimacy. A newly built temple could present itself as part of a tradition reaching into sacred antiquity. Its builders might use familiar proportions to suggest continuity with the oldest cities. The design becomes a credential. Political rulers also recognize its value. A king restoring a sanctuary does more than repair walls. He places his name within a respected architectural lineage and presents himself as guardian of divine order. Inscribed bricks proclaim his work. The physical plan supports the political message. Sacred architecture therefore spreads through several channels at once. Craftspeople carry technique. Ritual specialists preserve ceremonial requirements. Rulers sponsor imitation. Merchants and pilgrims carry descriptions between cities. No central authority commands the entire process. Tradition grows through repeated adoption. You examine a buttressed facade where sunlight settles inside deep recesses. The pattern strengthens the wall visually, making the surface appear animated. Such decoration appears at many Mesopotamian sites. Its practical purpose remains debated. The projections may improve structural stability, reduce broad cracking, or simply create a dignified sacred appearance. Symbolic meanings may also gather around them. Some scholars see the facade as an inherited sign of temple identity. Others emphasize construction logic and local development. The debate extends to the entire architectural tradition. Did sacred plans spread outward from a few influential centers, or did similar social needs produce similar buildings independently? Communities everywhere require gathering spaces, storage rooms, controlled entrances, and visible sacred focuses. Comparable solutions can emerge without direct copying, yet detailed combinations remain harder to dismiss as coincidence. A central hall aligned with a raised ritual place, surrounded by supporting rooms and approached indirectly, forms a distinctive arrangement. Repeated across regions, it suggests communication. University of Pennsylvania researchers studying ancient urbanism have emphasized that Mesopotamian cities belong to dense networks: boats, caravans, marriages, warfare, diplomacy, and pilgrimage connected populations constantly. Ideas moved along these routes with goods. Architecture was never isolated. A potter recognizes foreign vessel shapes. A builder notices unfamiliar brick proportions. A ritual singer learns a melody from visiting performers. Each borrowed element enters local tradition and changes slightly. Over time, origins become impossible to identify. A curious fringe theory suggests sacred plans were encoded within ceremonial songs. According to this idea, verses describe numbers of steps, wall lengths, doorway positions, and ritual directions. No preserved hymn provides a complete architectural blueprint of this kind. Still, oral formulas could help builders remember proportions. Rhythm supports memory. Repeated phrases can preserve sequences with surprising accuracy. A work song might coordinate brick carriers while also recalling traditional measurements. The possibility remains intriguing. Though unproven, you listen as builders chant while pulling a heavy beam into position. Each phrase matches the strain of the rope. The song names corners, walls, water, and divine proportion. Perhaps it contains no technical code, yet it binds labour to sacred purpose, helping many bodies act as one. Architecture spreads through such moments, not through one perfect drawing, but through gestures repeated across generations. A chord is stretched, a corner is checked, a platform is raised where worshippers expect it. The plan becomes familiar enough to feel inevitable. That familiarity gives the tradition astonishing longevity. Cities rise, decline, and vanish beneath new settlements. Languages shift. Dynasties disappear. Gods gain titles, lose temples, and merge with other divine figures. Still, sacred buildings continue arranging movement around a protected center. The old pattern adapts without surrendering its deepest logic. You stand inside a temple built far from Eridu. Its walls are taller, its decoration richer, and its administration more complex. Yet the room guides you toward one elevated place. Your path turns, your voice lowers. The design still knows what to do with you. No architect announces the inheritance. No tablet credits the first builders beside distant marshes. The blueprint survives without ownership. It belongs to every community that copies, adjusts, and rebuilds it. Across the plain, temple walls catch the final light in city after city. Their forms differ, but their shadows speak a related language. One ancient pattern has become many sacred houses. A cool draft rises from the excavation trench as your hand follows the outline of a wall barely wider than your palm. The room looks ordinary. Its dimensions resemble a house. While its raised installation suggests ceremony, ash lies near one corner, and fragments of pottery rest where daily activity might have taken place. Nothing announces a simple answer. Archaeologists face this problem whenever architecture stands between domestic life and sacred practice. Modern categories demand that a building must be either a house or a temple. Early communities may have recognized no such clean division. A family residence could host ceremonies, store communal goods, receive visitors, and preserve ancestral objects within the same walls. A ritual specialist might sleep beside the room where offerings were prepared. Elders could settle disputes near a platform used during seasonal rites. Home and sanctuary may have grown together. You step across the ancient threshold and imagine a household preparing the room before sunrise. Sleeping mats are rolled away, vessels are washed, and a low platform receives food. Neighbours arrive quietly. The same space that shelters ordinary life becomes ceremonial through movement, cleanliness, and shared expectation. Nothing in the walls needs to change, meaning changes instead. This possibility unsettles the familiar picture of Eridu's earliest temple. Perhaps the first sacred structure was not designed exclusively for a guild. Perhaps it belonged to a household entrusted with communal responsibilities. The raised platform may have supported offerings, but it might also have held storage jars, tools, or a respected ancestor's possessions. A low table could serve ritual meals and ordinary preparation. Context decides everything, yet context rarely survives completely. Researchers at the University of Chicago have emphasized that prehistoric buildings must be interpreted through architecture, artifacts, deposits, and comparison. No single feature proves religious function. An altar-shaped platform may appear sacred because later temples contain similar installations. That resemblance is important, but it can also encourage circular reasoning. You identify a temple because it resembles later temples. Then you use the early building to explain how later temples began. The logic becomes dangerously comfortable. A careful scholar therefore asks what other activities could produce the same evidence. Ash may come from offerings, cooking, heating, or accidental fates. Fish bones may represent ceremony, feasting, or household refuse. Repeated rebuilding may express sacred continuity, but it may also reflect inherited property and practical attachment to a favourable location. Every interpretation must survive alternatives. The building's unusual plan remains significant. Its internal arrangement differs from many ordinary houses, especially through controlled access and a strong focal area. Still, ordinary houses are not always ordinary. A prominent family might build differently because it receives guests, manages stores, or hosts community meetings. Architecture can express status without expressing divinity. You hear voices gathering inside the imagined room. A dispute over water has brought several households together. An elder sits near the raised platform, where everyone can see him clearly. Grain and fish wait nearby for a shared meal. The meeting begins with a brief offering. Administration, hospitality, and ritual occupy the same moment. Which activity defines the building? The question may have made little sense to the people using it. They could have understood the room through relationships rather than categories. It belonged to the community, the ancestors, the household, and the divine presence together. Modern classification prefers one label. Ancient life may prefer several. Oxford University historians studying early religion have noted that sacred institutions often emerge gradually from domestic and communal practices. A household shrine becomes a neighborhood focus. A gathering room receives offerings from beyond one family. Repeated ceremonies require storage, maintenance, and recognized guardians. The building slowly separates from ordinary residents. No single rebuilding marks the exact moment of transformation. The process resembles dawn. Darkness becomes light without providing one perfect instant when night ends. At Eridu, the earliest structure may occupy that uncertain horizon. It contains enough special features to suggest ritual importance, yet it remains small enough to resemble a carefully arranged house. This ambiguity may reveal its true significance. The first temple might not have appeared suddenly as a complete institution. It may have emerged from daily life, gathering sacred authority through repeated use. A room becomes different because people keep treating it differently. The change begins socially before it becomes monumental. Stanford University researchers studying cooperation have explored how shared spaces strengthen group identity. A building used for feasting, decision-making, and ritual can unite households without requiring permanent centralized authority. Such spaces often serve several purposes because early communities cannot afford specialized buildings for every activity. One room must work hard. It hosts meals, negotiations, ceremonies, storage, teaching, and remembrance. Specialization arrives when population, wealth, and administration increase. The architecture then separates functions once held together. Side chambers divide preparation from worship. Storerooms separate goods from gathering spaces. Restricted areas distinguish specialists from visitors. The earliest room may therefore preserve a world before those divisions hardened. A curious fringe proposal suggests the first building was a school where secret knowledge was taught beside ritual practice. Supporters point toward Enki's later association with wisdom, craft, and instruction. No evidence identifies desks, lessons, or formal teaching within the earliest levels. Still, knowledge certainly moved through such spaces. Young people learned songs, measurements, social rules, and ceremonial gestures by watching experienced adults. Education did not require a separate institution. The room could teach without being a school. A scholarly debate remains open concerning whether the earliest sacred architecture reflects communal equality or emerging elite control. Some researchers see shared ritual buildings as evidence of cooperation among households. Others detect the first signs of inequality, with selected families controlling ceremonies, stored goods, and access to influential spaces. Both patterns can occupy the same foundation. A communal building may belong to everyone while still granting special authority to those holding its keys. Participation does not guarantee equality. You imagine a respected household maintaining the room across several generations. Its members clean the floor, receive offerings, and remember the correct ceremonial sequence. Their service earns trust. Trust brings influence. Influence allows them to decide who enters, what is stored, and how goods are distributed. No ruler commands the settlement, yet power has already found a doorway. The building becomes a place where service and privilege quietly exchange clothing. Yale University scholars studying household religion have shown that domestic spaces can carry substantial political and spiritual authority. A family controlling an ancestral shrine may shape community memory. A household hosting feasts may build alliances. A room does not need monumental walls to organize power. Its importance can rest upon who gathers there and what decisions emerge. This understanding changes how you read the foundations. Small size no longer means limited influence. A modest room can hold obligations reaching across an entire settlement. The plastered floor may receive footsteps from distant households. The platform may witness agreements remembered for decades. Its walls may contain the earliest form of public authority. Yet caution remains necessary. Archaeology cannot recover every conversation, gesture, or social relationship. It preserves material traces filtered through decay, rebuilding, and excavation. The room may have served purposes nobody has considered. A workshop can contain ritual, a residence can manage trade, a council house can shelter a divine image. The most honest interpretation may remain deliberately open. You kneel beside the foundation while evening enters the trench. The wall casts a narrow shadow across the floor. One side feels domestic, the other feels sacred. Perhaps the distinction exists only in your mind. The people who built this place may have understood that human life, communal order, and divine presence occupied the same room. The foundation conceals no single answer. It conceals the moment when separate worlds had not yet separated. The last light settles across Eridu, turning every exposed wall into a thin line of bronze. Wind moves over the mound, carrying dust through rooms that no longer possess roofs. You stand above the oldest foundations and try to imagine the complete sanctuary. The walls rise again within your mind, reed beams cross overhead, plaster covers the bricks, and clean water waits inside carefully prepared vessels. Yet the reconstruction never becomes certain. One doorway remains disputed. One platform may be ceremonial, domestic, or administrative. A missing wall could change the entire route through the building. The blueprint refuses to become complete. Archaeologists can measure surviving foundations, compare pottery, study soil, and trace each rebuilding phase. They can identify patterns repeated across many centuries. They cannot recover every intention. A builder may place a wall for structural strength, while a ritual specialist sees sacred direction within the same line. A community leader may value the room because it gathers people. One decision carries several meanings. Research associated with the University of Pennsylvania confirms that early Mesopotamian settlements developed through overlapping systems of religion, labor, storage, exchange, and household authority. These systems did not begin as separate institutions. They grew together, each strengthening the others through repeated practice. The temple belongs to that complicated birth. Its blueprint records architecture because its measurements organize clay, weight, movement, and light. It records theology because those measurements guide people toward an invisible presence. It also records society. Doors reveal access, storerooms reveal resources, platforms reveal attention, while restricted chambers reveal authority. The plan describes relationships between people as clearly as relationships between walls. You walk along the edge of the central hall. The floor lies open beneath the evening sky. Though it once carried lamps, vessels, mats, and footsteps, nothing explains which object mattered most. Perhaps the sacred image stood upon the raised platform. Perhaps water itself represented Enki more powerfully than any carved figure. Perhaps the god was understood through the ordered room rather than one visible form. The building may have been his image. Its walls expressed boundaries, its vessels expressed abundance, its hidden rooms expressed knowledge that remained protected from casual sight. The entire sanctuary performed Enki's character. Wisdom appeared as arrangement. This interpretation feels persuasive, yet it remains an interpretation. Archaeology provides physical evidence, while meaning must be approached through comparison, later texts, and disciplined imagination. The missing portions remain dangerous. Human beings dislike unfinished patterns. The mind quickly supplies absent walls, forgotten rituals, and confident explanations. Soon, possibility begins pretending to be memory. A curious fringe belief claims the true blueprint remains hidden beneath the deepest excavated floor. According to this idea, an earlier structure waits below, containing a perfect plan inherited from unknown teachers. No evidence confirms such a concealed master sanctuary. Excavation cannot continue forever without damaging what it seeks to understand. The deepest layers therefore preserve both material and possibility. Something may remain beneath them. That possibility should encourage caution rather than fantasy. An undiscovered flaw could change dates, reveal another building phase, or complicate the accepted sequence. It would not automatically prove a lost advanced civilization. The most extraordinary discovery may be something quieter. Perhaps another small room waits below, built by people using familiar clay, reeds, and patient observation. Its proportions might show that sacred planning began even earlier than scholars currently believe. Such a discovery would deepen the mystery without making it less human. Oxford University historians continue debating whether Eridu should be called the world's earliest city, earliest temple centre, or one influential settlement among several emerging communities. Definitions shape the answer. A city may require population, administration, specialised labour, monumental architecture, or written records. Eridu satisfies some measures earlier than others. Its importance does not depend upon winning a modern title. The mound preserves an unusually long conversation between people and sacred space. That conversation begins before writing and continues into the Age of Kings. Few places offer such depth. You look toward the plain where ancient water once moved through reeds and channels. The sanctuary appears to gather that entire landscape into one measured form. Mud becomes wall, water becomes ritual, labour becomes obligation, memory becomes authority. The blueprint is therefore larger than the building. It contains a theory of existence. The world is unstable, but boundaries can be made. Resources are scattered, but cooperation can gather them. Human beings are vulnerable, yet knowledge allows them to shape clay, guide water, and preserve memory. Perhaps this is why Enki belongs here. He represents no simple victory over nature. His wisdom lies in negotiation, adjustment, and intelligent restraint. He teaches that order must remain flexible because the world refuses permanent obedience. A canal silts, a wall cracks, a dynasty collapses. The answer is not despair. The answer is repair. The people of Eridu rebuild because perfection never arrives. Their temple remains unfinished across every generation. Each sanctuary solves old problems while creating new ones. Each restoration preserves a pattern while quietly changing it. The blueprint survives through revision. Stanford University research into cultural memory suggests that traditions endure not by remaining identical, but by adapting while preserving recognizable forms. Eridu demonstrates that principle in clay. The sacred center changes, yet people continue returning to the same place. Their persistence creates continuity deeper than any single wall. Perhaps the lost blueprint was never one drawing. Perhaps it was a shared promise. Build here, face this direction. Carry water carefully. Enter with restraint. Remember that the visible world depends upon hidden things. Those instructions could survive without writing. They could pass through hands, ceremonies, measurements, stories, and the quiet authority of repeated movement. You stand where those movements have ended, the air cools, and the last brightness fades from the foundations. No final inscription waits beneath the dust. No architect steps forward to explain the design. The temple offers only fragments. Perhaps that is enough. You allow your breathing to slow while darkness settles gently across Eridu. The mound loses its sharp edges and becomes a soft shape beneath the stars. The exposed walls fade into the earth. You no longer need to rebuild every room. You no longer need to decide which platform held the first offering, or which doorway admitted the earliest worshipper. The questions can remain open. Beyond the mound, imagined reeds sway beside black water. A narrow boat rests against the bank, moving slightly with each quiet ripple. No voices call from the settlement. No tools strike clay. Only the soft wind continues across the plain, touching broken bricks, shallow trenches, and the sealed floors still resting below. You picture cool water inside a simple bowl. A small flame trembles above it, reflected without sound. The light does not reveal the bottom. It does not need to. Some truths remain gentle because they are incomplete. They ask nothing from you except patience. Eridu may preserve the first temple, the first civic memory, or one early step within a much wider human awakening. Perhaps its blueprint records a house for Enki, years ago. Perhaps it records the moment people discovered that space could carry belief, authority, and hope. Perhaps it records something even simpler. A frightened community stands beside uncertain water and decides to create a center. They gather clay, they measure walls, they place an offering where everyone can see it. Then they return for generation after generation. Because returning gives the world a shape. The stars remain above the silent mound. Hidden water rests below. Between them lies the unfinished house of Enki, and perhaps, as your thoughts grow quieter and the ancient plain dissolves into sleep, the story is not yet complete. Good night.